Chapter 439. The Sudden Appearance of Snake, Lizard and Tiger. Leopard startled everyone once more. She did not know who they were, but it was clear that Snake, Lizard and Tiger, Leopard, who had just entered the race, were not ordinary people, judging from how they drove past the crowd at lightning speed to get to Yunjian. It was especially so when they saw Snake, Lizard and Tiger, Leopard going up to Yunjian respectfully and calling her Sister Jian. Hua Meiling and the others were dumbfounded when they saw the scene. Zhang Ziyuan, in particular, had been interested in Yunjian. Until now, the shock that Yunjian had given him was no small amount. But she was clearly a traveler from country Z with Hua Meiling. How did she know those people? Zhang Ziyuan and the others were deep in thought with a frown. Tisk. When Tullidge saw Snake, Lizard and Tiger, Leopard walking toward Yunjian and greeting Yunjian respectively, he was slightly taken aback. Snake, Lizard and Tiger, Leopard's current status in Kosha mercenaries was higher than his. Snake, Lizard and Tiger, Leopard were both in charge of Kosha mercenaries. In other words, the authority of Kosha mercenaries was tightly held in their hands. In spite of it, other than their status being higher than Tullidge's, Tullidge did not give Snake, Lizard and Tiger, Leopard any face. The Kosha mercenaries were divided into two factions in a hostile manner. One faction was Snake, Lizard and others who were on Yunjian's side. The other faction was Tullidge and a bunch of old men who were dissatisfied with Yunjian and had once followed Kosha mercenaries' previous boss. Of course, other than Tullidge, there were plenty of old men who had once followed Kosha mercenaries' previous boss. Of course, even when Snake, Lizard and Tiger, Leopard greeted Yunjian respectfully, Tullidge did not associate Yunjian with the terrifying woman, slaying god. After all, no matter how much a person's appearance changed, it was impossible to change the calluses on their hands as well. The young lady in front of him was sizing up Tullidge's hands. Her delicate and smooth hands were not the same as slaying god's hands that were full of scars and calluses. What are you waiting for? Kill everyone. Since Tullidge had decided to rebel, he would not turn back, especially at this critical juncture. He was prepared to fight Snake, Lizard and Tiger, Leopard to death. Ha! If slaying god were here today, Tullidge would probably be terror-stricken. No one knew better than Tu Ligay how terrifying the woman named Slaying God was. Even when Slaying God took away Gu Sha mercenaries, Tullidge did not even dare to make a sound. Unfortunately, there were only Snake, Lizard and Tiger, Leopard now. Slaying God. Therefore, Tullidge wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to rebel. He even wanted to claim the entire Gu Sha mercenaries as his own. Tullidge's words made everyone present turn pale with fright and panic. The men around them were armed with machine guns. They could kill them instantly with a sweep of their weapons. At this moment, everyone felt the despair of impending death. Tullidge, open your eyes wide and see who I am. How dare you act so insolently in front of me? Have you forgotten how Kosha mercenaries fell into my hands back then? Just as everyone thought that they were going to die in despair, a brash and arrogant female voice rang. Following the gaze, they saw Yunjian pulling out a butterfly knife and playing with it in her palm as she spoke to Tullidge arrogantly. Watching Yunjian play with the butterfly knife, Tullidge's pupils contracted. The way she played with the knife was a perfect match for the terrifying woman in his mind. Chapter 440. Yunjian's words not only shocked Tullidge, but everyone present could not help but inhale sharply. The Kosha mercenaries was a mercenary organization. Yunjian's words were as clear as day. Yunjian, who claimed to be the Kosha mercenaries, had fallen into their hands from Tullidge and the rest. Was she not the boss of the Kosha mercenaries? The boss of the Kosha mercenaries, slaying god? The group of people present was completely terrified and stunned. If 99% of the people present did not know Tullidge, then who did not know the king of the Secret Service, Slaying God? Speaking of Slaying God, most of the people present knew her. Slaying God, she had once swept the world's newspapers and was even listed as the world's strongest female Secret Service agent. She was also the world's most dangerous person, an international 3S wanted criminal. There was once a reporter who jokingly introduced her in the newspapers. "You're not far from death if you meet this person." This topic had been a hot topic for a period of time, so much so that some people still remembered it. However, no one would have thought that the legendary king of the Secret Service, slaying God, the #1 Secret Service agent, the boss of the kosher mercenaries, was actually this young girl in front of them. This was too unbelievable. Everyone's fear did not affect Yun Jian at all. Yun Jian's eyes were fixed on Tullidge. Her fingers that were swinging the butterfly knife paused. No one knew why Tullidge was so afraid of her. Of course, Tullidge and the other old men were excluded. Back then, Yun Jian had only used a butterfly knife and a bulletproof vest to break into the kosher mercenaries alone and killed the previous boss of the kosher mercenaries. Her speed was so fast that she could catch up to a bullet. In terms of skills, Tullidge and the rest of the old men were no match for her at all. However, Yun Jian could not touch them back then. This was because once the kosher mercenaries were in chaos, other mercenary groups would take advantage of the situation. Just like how Yun Jian had killed Su Zhoujing, the boss of the Skybridge sect, she had only led a small group of men to subjugate the Flying Passage sect, which was in the midst of internal strife without much effort. This principle was the same. Old fogey, I didn't expect that after 2 years of peace, you still won't change your mind. You actually want to replace me. Yun Jian swung her butterfly knife and stepped forward. She was not the least bit afraid of the people with machine guns around her. She was not afraid of being beaten into a beehive. Yun Jian's actions made Tullidge's eyelids twitch. Today is the day you die. Yun Jian's flat words sounded different to everyone's ears. Everyone present felt their hairs stand on end, and their hearts and minds tensed up. Especially Hua Meiling and the rest who had just interacted with Yun Jian. Their shock was indescribable. They had thought that Yun Jian and Qing Yu were just regular travelers. They did not expect them to have such terrifying identities. Tullidge no longer hid his true nature after recognizing that Yun Jian was slaying God. He knew that once he was exposed to Yun Jian, there would only be 2 outcomes. Either he would die or Yun Jian would die. It was obvious that Tullidge would choose the latter. Fire the machine guns and kill them. Tullidge ordered his men who were armed with machine guns. This roar was very intense. However, Tullidge's roar did not elicit any response. Tullidge shouted again. Tullidge finally came to his senses. He looked at Yun Jian with a terrified gaze and growled, "You, what have you done?" Chapter 441. Yun Jian spoke calmly, but it made Tullidge and Sebaer who stood behind him shudder. What? What do you mean? Tullidge's eyelids twitched as he glanced at Yun Jian in fear. I mean it literally. You can try if you don't believe me. See if they listen to you or me. Yun Jian crossed her arms and looked at Tullidge fearlessly with a smirk. She had disappeared for half a year. Although she was in Longmen City, it was not as if she had not made any arrangements. She had not shown herself in the kosher mercenaries in order to give Tullidge and the other old men the wrong impression. Yun Jian was dead. In spite of it, Yun Jian had been planning to replace the men under the kosher mercenaries with her own men. Yun Jian had not done it herself, but she had snake, lizard and tiger. Leopard, snake, lizard and tiger. Leopard were absolutely loyal to her. Yun Jian had been in Longmen City for the past few months, but snake, lizard had been running around to recruit capable men. When Yun Jian had just taken over the kosher mercenaries, she had already secretly replaced the men under the old men with her own men. Her actions were done discreetly and with snake, lizard's efficiency. The old men did not suspect a thing. Just like Tullidge, he only reacted when he could no longer order his men to obey his orders. You! Tullidge instantly realized that something was wrong. He reacted quickly, but it was too late. If Yun Jian had killed these old men before, the kosher mercenaries would have lost their status in the underworld for a while. Now, she had full confidence that she would be completely unaffected after annihilating this group of old fogies. Since you can't order them around, I'll do it. The corners of Yun Jian's lips lifted into a devilish smirk. In spite of it, Yun Jian's demeanor was even more terrifying to Tullidge and his men. Especially after knowing that Yun Jian was slaying God, Tullidge and his men dared not treat Yun Jian as normal anymore. Kill him, Yun Jian uttered faintly, maintaining a smile that did not reach her eyes. As soon as the order was given, the group of subordinates carrying machine guns immediately moved. The men aimed their machine guns at Tullidge. Bang! 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 Then, a series of machine gun shots were heard. These people were really taking orders from Yun Jian. Tullidge dodged the bullets in fear. Except for the group of subordinates carrying machine guns, they swept towards Tullidge and killed the group of people closest to Tullidge in seconds. Tullidge was not weak. He was old, but he had been training, so he had a decent physique. Tullidge managed to avoid being hit in the vitals of the machine guns, but he was still scratched. After a minute, other than Tullidge, who was covered in wounds, and Sebaer, who was panting on the ground, none of Tullig's subordinates were still alive. Even the person closest to him was killed on the spot because he couldn't avoid the wave of machine gun fire just now. A minute later, Yun Jian gestured for them to stop. Tullidge and Sebaer were not weak. They were not easy to deal with. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. She stood in front of Tullidge again and waved her butterfly knife at him in front of everyone. Since the machine guns can't kill you, I'll have to do it myself. Chapter 442. With a butterfly knife in her hand, Yun Jian walked slowly towards Sebaer, who was lying on the ground on the verge of death, and Tullidge, who was in a sorry state. She held the butterfly knife in her fair hand, but her figure was slender. At least from the black eyes of Hua Meiling and the rest, her figure was clearly reflected. She was tall and strong. The current Yun Jian was nothing like her previous self. The current Yun Jian was like a demon from hell. Is she really going to kill them? Hua Meiling's horrified voice was heard faintly. There was a hint of shock in her voice. Aside from Hua Meiling, Zhang Ziyuan and Fan Weiwei, who had been looking at Yun Jian with ill intentions earlier, were so shocked that they were speechless. Old man, do you have anything to say before you die? Yun Jian spun the butterfly knife nimbly between her fingers as she looked at Tullidge and asked softly. Ha ha ha. Tullidge was in a sorry state after dodging the machine gun's barrage. Even the corner of his shirt was torn from the friction, but he was still laughing. After all, it was a barrage of bullets. No matter how powerful Tullidge was, there were still quite a number of bullets that entered his body. It was just that he had managed to avoid being hit in his vital parts. However, Tullidge knew Slaying God's ability. There was no way he could withstand Slaying God's attack. Slaying God, putting our grudges aside, you're the strongest person I've ever met in my life. But I, Tullidge, am not a weakling, and I won't let you kill me. Tullidge roared as he took out a silver pistol from his belt and pointed it at his temple. Bang! He ended his life. Tullidge's eyes widened as he stared at Tullidge. Tullidge's eyes widened as he stared at Tullidge. Ah! Someone in the crowd screamed when they saw that. Yun Jian was even more beautiful under the sunlight. However, she was unfazed by Tullidge's death. It was as if an insignificant person had died in front of her. At that moment, it was as if she had returned to her past life when she regarded human lives as worthless. She pursed her red lips slightly and said softly to Snake, Lizard and the other two behind her, kill Sebaer and follow me back to the organization. Looking at Yun Jian, who was surrounded by the crowd, Hua Meiling and the rest felt the distance between them and Yun Jian for the first time. Zhang Ziyuan could no longer use the word shocked to describe his fear. He was thankful that he had not offended Yun Jian's wrath. Dozens of kilometers away from Heifei Island, there was a hidden gloomy island. The island was very large, and the trees were dense. The large forest completely covered the buildings in the depths of the forest. If the sunlight occasionally shone down, one could clearly see that the walls of these buildings were imprinted with large and unique skull imprints. This was the headquarters of the Wuxia mercenaries. Because Wuxia mercenaries was hidden deep in the forest, it was difficult to be discovered. At this moment, a group of old men in their 40s and 50s were gathered in a large building. The crowd's was, Slaying God has been missing for half a year. I think she's most likely dead. Snake, lizard and tiger. Leopard are troublesome, but as long as we work together, we'll be able to take back the Wuxia mercenaries. That's right. Slaying God has occupied the Wuxia mercenaries for so long. It's time for her to return. The group was aggressive as they plotted a conspiracy. It was because Slaying God had been missing for half a year that they dared to be so brazen. Otherwise, this group of old men would not have dared to do anything when Slaying God was still in the organization. Bam! Suddenly, the door was slammed open. Tiger, leopard and snake. Lizard were escorting a young girl as they entered. The girl tossed a package on the ground and chuckled. Elders, how have you been? I heard that you missed me a lot. The package fell to the ground and rolled twice on the ground. Then, the thing inside the package was revealed. It was actually a bloody head. Chapter 443. The Kosha mercenary's boss, Slaying God, had never looked like her in her previous life. Even the Kosha mercenary's elders had never seen her before. This was because Slaying God would appear with a different appearance and identity each time she appeared. She would not stay for long. However, all the Kosha mercenary's elders and higher-ups knew that Slaying God's ability was not something anyone could compare to. Therefore, when Yun Jian tossed Tullij's head in front of the elders, only one word flashed in their minds: Slaying God. Only Slaying God would be so insolent. Only Slaying God. Snake, Lizard, and Tiger. Leopard would escort her back to the Kosha mercenaries. Slaying God. One of the elders shouted in horror. Apart from Snake, Lizard and Tiger, Leopard, the Kosha mercenaries' elders were all helpers left behind by the previous boss. At the same time, all of them were old men who were constantly thinking of ways to kill Yun Jian. Clearly, these old men did not expect Yun Jian to return alive after going missing for half a year. Usually, there was only one outcome for those who went missing for more than half a year. They were dead. Therefore, even if it was the group of assassins and secret agents who were ranked at the top internationally, they would be automatically assumed to be dead if they went missing for a year. Their ranking would then be rearranged. Life and death, as long as one was on this path, no one could guarantee their life or death. Why are all of you so excited to welcome me back? I'm really flattered. Yun Jian scoffed. She led Snake, Lizard and Tiger, Leopard around Tullij's head, which was now covered in dried blood, and walked to the front, where only the highest authority had the right to sit. None of the elders below dared to make a sound. However, at that moment, everyone's heart was in turmoil. Slaying God was not dead. Yun Jian's fingers had already grazed the long table and she slid along the table to sit on a stool. Now, it's time for us to settle the score. Yun Jian tapped her fingertips on the table twice and smiled. Her smile made her look like a harmless girl, beautiful and alluring. The group of elders was shocked. You joined forces with the Inferno Ring to secretly kidnap my brother. This is a generous gift you gave me half a year ago. Yun Jian's eyes suddenly turned sharp. As she spoke, she slammed the table and stood up. Her sharp eyes swept across the room. The Inferno Ring was the mastermind behind her brother's death in her previous life. But Yun Jian knew that all of this had something to do with this bunch of old men in front of her. Now that her brother had been reborn with her, this was Yun Jian's fortune. However, she, Yun Jian, was going to take back the torture her brother had suffered from this group of people, bit by bit. So now, do any elders have any last words? Yun Jian's sharp eyes changed. She lowered her eyes and looked at the elders as if she was looking at a group of dead people. Yun Jian was prepared to spill the beans upon her return this time. The pupils of the elders constricted. Finally, an old man who was about 60 years old stood out. This elder's name was Bubba. Seeing that Yun Jian had shed all pretense of cordiality, Bubba did not bother pretending. Instead, he grinned menacingly and said, "Haha, Slaying God, we don't mind telling you that we've joined forces with various assassin organizations. We must have surrounded this place by now. Last words? We'll pass on our last words to you today." Since he had decided to spill the beans, Bubba took out a rescue device from his pocket and pressed the button. This was the device that he had requested for help from the other assassin organizations. Once the button was pressed, the Kosha Mercenaries Island would be completely surrounded by the assassin organizations that had been working with them and had been lying in wait for a long time. Chapter 444. Yun Jian's long eyelashes fluttered as she watched Bubba press the rescue button. She curled her lips into a smile. "Oh, that's it?" Yun Jian raised her brow and asked with a smile. Her tone was brisk and carefree. She did not sound panicked at all when she was in a disadvantageous position. Bubba frowned slightly as well, grumbling to himself. She was just bluffing. He had already formed an alliance with various assassin organizations and mercenary organizations. Even the internationally renowned assassin organization, an Hun group, had agreed to work with him. He would like to see how Slaying God was going to survive this time. Today he, Bubba, would lead everyone to break her legend. What Slaying God? She was going to be destroyed by them in the end. So what if Slaying God was powerful? Without any support, could it be that she could defy the heavens and fight against all of them by herself? I'll wait and see. Yun Jian sat back on the chair calmly. She looked at the group of old men unhurriedly. Suddenly, a glint flashed in her eyes. A murderous aura emerged. None of the elders dared to move when they saw that Yun Jian did not move. No one dared to doubt slaying God's ability. Among the group of elders before her, which one of them was not an internationally renowned figure? If an outsider were to witness this scene, the group of internationally renowned figures would be on high alert as they watched the girl sitting on the bench at ease. How shocking would that be? However, those in the know would not feel that way because the girl sitting on the bench was slaying God. Thud, thud, thud. Then, loud footsteps came from outside the door. Bubba was overjoyed when he saw Yun Jian. His rescue was here. The elders were overjoyed. At the same time, they glared fiercely at Yun Jian. They looked as if they wanted to swallow Yun Jian alive. Bam! The door that had been closed earlier was slammed open again. After that, the people who entered through the door were the leaders of the various assassin organizations. Bubba and the others turned around excitedly and happened to see a group of people entering through the door. This group of people who came in were all the leaders of the major assassin organizations. Bubba proudly walked over and expressed his goodwill to the leaders of the assassin organizations. Then, he turned around and led the group of elders to look at Yun Jian. His eyes emitted a vicious aura. Slaying God, come down if you know what's good for you. Otherwise, cough cough, don't blame us for being impolite. Bubba furrowed his brows as he looked at Yun Jian. With the support of these major assassin organizations behind them, Bubba and the other old fellows instantly became arrogant. Heh! Yun Jian pursed her lips and sneered. Behind him, Snake, Lizard and Tiger. Leopard remained motionless. They only listened to Yun Jian's orders. If Yun Jian did not move, they would not move either. Okay. Slaying God, since you don't know what's good for you, don't blame us for being rude. Bubba grinned viciously and was about to join forces with the assassin organizations to surround Yun Jian. Let's see who dares. Just then, a voice was heard from the door. Yun Jian's eyes flickered when she heard the male voice. She turned around and saw Adam, dressed in a suit, walking in through the door. Clearly, he was here on behalf of the Enhun organization. Everyone present was aware of the Enhun organization's ability. They were more terrifying than the Kosha mercenaries. Therefore, everyone was filled with awe at once. Bubba walked forward with his head hung low and lowered his head respectfully at Adam. Master Adam, you're here? The strongest assassin organization he had invited was here to support him. Bubba cursed inwardly. Slaying God, you're going to die today. However, Adam did not even look at him. He walked around the crowd and came to Yun Jian. He lowered his head and greeted Yun Jian respectfully. Young madam. Who was Adam? He was the person who followed the most mysterious leader of the Enhun organization. Since he was here, it meant that. Suddenly, a tall man appeared at the door. He had dashing eyebrows and starry eyes. His sharp gaze swept across the crowd, carrying with it an absolute aura and the air of a king. I heard that someone wants to touch my woman? Are you ready to make an enemy out of the Enhun organization? The man sneered and strode forward, enunciating each word clearly. The most mysterious leader of the Enhun organization. At this moment, everyone's hearts were filled with shock. Chapter 445. However, the most shocking thing was what Ce said. What did he mean by his woman? In an instant, a frightening and shocking thought suddenly emerged. Could slaying God be Enhun's leader's woman? The Enhun organization was known as the world's top assassin organization because it was so powerful that words could not describe it. Although the Kosha mercenaries were powerful, the Kosha mercenaries were currently embroiled in internal strife. How could a powerful organization be powerful without unity? At the end of the day, the Enhun organization had trained countless assassins and secret agents. These people had gained a foothold in the international arena. The Enhun organization, on the other hand, had the weapons and equipment to fight against a country. Under such circumstances, the Enhun organization was actually more powerful than the Kosha mercenaries. In other words, provoking the Enhun organization was far more terrifying than provoking the Kosha mercenaries. Therefore, after Ce's words, most of the assassin organization members took a few shaky steps back. What a joke! Their assassin organization paled in comparison to the Enhun organization. Were they not digging their own graves? Looking at Ce, who was making his way to Yun Jian, Bubba's aged face took on a solemn expression as his brows were almost knitted together. This was the leader of the Hun organization? How could he be so young? More importantly, slaying God was his woman? The Hun organization's power was beyond Bubba and the rest's imagination. However, the current situation told Bubba and the rest that either slaying God or they would die. They had no choice. Just as Bubba and the rest were overwhelmed with fear and had no time to think about what to do next, Ce was already in front of Yunjian. Yunjian slowly stood up from her seat. She stared at Ce and asked softly, "Why are you here?" Yunjian did not ask in a reprimanding tone. Instead, she spoke in a tone that said she was relieved that he was here. Ce's appearance made Yunjian heave a sigh of relief. To be honest, she was already prepared to fight to the death with this group of old men today. She wasn't completely confident. However, they were not completely unprepared. But even if she lost, she wanted to lose in a glorious way. In spite of it, Ce's arrival gave her a feeling that came from the bottom of her heart. It was as if as long as he was here, everything could be relaxed. "I'm here to help you," Ce pursed his lips, revealing a trace of handsomeness on his flawless face. These three ordinary words softened Yunjian's heart. No assassin organization would participate in the internal strife of other organizations unless it was profitable. Just like the assassin organizations that had come to help Bubba and the others. As for Ce, he didn't want any benefits, nor did he ask for anything from her. Just these three words touched Yunjian's heart. She had fought alone in her previous life and had been alone for 2 lifetimes. She had relied on her own strength to reach the peak of the world. Yunjian looked at Ce and nodded heavily. Tiger, leopard and snake, lizard, who were standing in front of Yunjian, were equally stunned. Beep beep. At this moment, the communication device in Adam's hand rang. Adam hurriedly accepted the call. Mo Sen's calm but shocking voice came from the communication device. The 536 enemies on the nearby islands have all been annihilated. Mo Sen's voice came from the communication device. It was neither fast nor slow, but everyone present was shocked and terrified. What? Those 536 people, weren't they the people sent by all the assassin organizations to rescue Bubba? All annihilated? And one of the 4 leaders of the Hun organization, Mo Sen, had personally taken action. It had only been a short while, and all 536 experts were gone? Chapter 446. The leaders of the various assassin organizations whom Bubba had invited to assist him stood rooted to the ground in fear. Dead. In order to help Bubba fight slaying God, these assassin organizations had selected the most powerful people in their organizations. However, they were now informed that the most powerful people in their assassin organizations were all dead. How long had it been? Fighting an Hun organization? This was the outcome. The assassin organization's representatives were horrified and regretful, but no one dared to say anything with Ce around. Their organization's strongest experts had been killed, which meant that their assassin organization would be completely paralyzed for a few years. So many powerful people had died. Each of these 536 people had been trained by the organization at a cost of tens of thousands of gold coins. That's 536 people, you know. This was definitely a huge loss. Now, other than regretting that they had agreed to help Bubba and the rest deal with slaying God, the assassin organizations hated Bubba as well. If not for Bubba's invitation, they would not have suffered such a loss. After hearing the news, Bubba and the rest of the old men were completely devastated. An Hun organization had not made a move yet, but it was shocking when they did. Initially, Bubba had thought that he had gotten an Hun organization to help him take down the Kosha mercenaries. However, Ce's appearance and Adam's words through the communication device had completely driven him into despair. They had lost. They had completely lost. They had lost before the battle even started. Forget about Yunjian, who had an Hun organization's help. Even without an Hun's help, Bubba and the rest understood that they might not be able to defeat Yunjian even if they joined forces with the assassin organizations. She was slaying God after all. Yunjian's lips parted in a smile when she saw the despair on Bubba and the others' faces. Even though she had not won with her own strength, at least Bubba and the rest had betrayed her in her previous life and helped Inferno Ring kidnap her younger brother. She could finally avenge them. Looking at how happy Yunjian was with her lips pressed together, Ce wore a handsome smile as well. As long as she was happy, Even if she wanted the moon in the sky, he would think of a way to get it. Mo-sen, who had spoken through the communicator, quickly led a group of people from an hun who were covered in black gauze and rushed in. He walked straight to Ce and nodded. "Young master, the annihilation is complete." "Yes." Ce nodded lightly. He was standing in front of Yunjian, and his hand was already on her slender waist. Pausing for a moment, his sharp eyes suddenly sharpened like a hawk's. "Kill everyone here." By everyone, he was referring to Bubba and the others, including the people from the assassin organization. The reason was simple. Since they knew that he was the leader of an hun, they had to die. "Yes." Mo-sen nodded and then extended his hand to instruct the group of men who were covered in black gauze. "We were wrong. We promise that we will not find trouble with the kosher mercenaries in the future." The people in charge of the assassin organization were scared silly and all of them howled. "Ha, since you know my identity as the young master, you have to die." Adam chuckled and was the first to rush forward. In an instant, the scene was filled with blood and flesh. Yunjian naturally knew why Ce did this. The fewer people who knew that he was the leader of an hun, the better. He would kill anyone who knew about this. Yunjian pushed Ce's hand away from her waist. She pointed at the stunned snake, lizard and tiger, leopard and said to Ce, "They are my people. They won't tell anyone about this." Yunjian did this to prevent Ce from killing snake, lizard and tiger, leopard. Ce, however, replied with a small smile, I know everything about you." Chapter 447. Yunjian smiled with her lips pressed together when she saw Ce's reaction. Her smile surprised both snake, lizard and tiger, leopard. What was even more shocking was how Ce had addressed Yunjian as my woman without mincing words. Since when did their sister Jian get together with an hun's leader? It was not a bad thing though. There was a reason why Adam and Mo-san could become an hun's leaders and follow Ce all the way. Of course, the two of them weren't bad at fighting, which was an extremely important reason. The old men of kosher mercenaries, including those from the assassin organization, were not easy to deal with. After all, they would not stand there stupidly and allow themselves to be slaughtered. But even so, Adam and Mo-san quickly gained the upper hand and killed all of them on the spot after a brief confrontation. After completing Ce's orders, both of them came to Ce and told him, "Young master, they're all dead." The ground was littered with corpses, but Yunjian and the others did not even frown. It was the same when they took down the kosher mercenaries' previous boss, kosher mercenaries. Things like this were nothing out of the ordinary for Yunjian and the others who were in this circle. This was how the world worked. Winners were kings and losers were bandits. Losers were bandits. The weak deserved to die. There was no reason for it. Ce nodded slightly. Yunjian turned to instruct snake, lizard and tiger, leopard that the kosher mercenaries would be reorganized. Now that Buba and the others were dead, the positions of these elders were vacant. What Yunjian meant was that anyone who was capable should be promoted. Yunjian left the selection of people to snake, lizard and tiger, leopard. This period of time was enough for them to be busy enough. Yunjian would send people to take care of the corpses here. Ce was currently holding Yunjian's hand as they walked out of the forest. Both of them did not leave the forest but came to a more tranquil place. When they arrived, Ce smirked at Yunjian. His tall figure almost covered Yunjian's petite figure. "Slaying God," Ce said faintly as he looked at Yunjian with interest. Yunjian looked to the side. She did not look at Ce but her heart was racing. She did not tell Ce her identity in the beginning. He did not hold anything back while she kept everything a secret. "Do you know something?" Yunjian heaved a sigh of relief. She looked at Ce with a probing gaze. Ce suddenly leaned over to Yunjian's face. He was taller than her, so Ce had to lower his head to touch Yunjian's cheek. At this moment, Ce's breath was right in front of Yunjian. He smirked and his handsome face became clearer. "What do you want me to know?" Ce suddenly teased. He lowered his head and probed Yunjian's collarbone. This action caused everyone to feel incomparably bitter. Yunjian blushed. Just when Yunjian thought that Ce was going to say something else, he stood up abruptly and put some distance between himself and her. He paused and said, "Don't say it if you don't want to." There was a tinge of disappointment in his words. She did not come clean in the end. Even if he already knew the truth. Just when Ce turned to leave, Yunjian's resolute voice was heard. I was reborn. It was the sandalwood box that made me who I am now. Chapter 448. Ce was overjoyed when he heard her. He was not surprised by Yunjian's rebirth, nor was he shocked. I've known about this for a long time. Ce returned to Yunjian's side. Looking at her, there seemed to be a warm current flowing slowly into his heart. His joy stemmed from Yunjian's confession. He wanted to hear it from her personally because when she chose to tell him the secret hidden in the deepest part of her heart, it meant that she had truly acknowledged him. Now, Ce could confirm that Yunjian had completely accepted him. Ce wanted to hug Yunjian, but Yunjian dodged him with a sidestep. She gritted her teeth and pouted at Ce. You know? Then why are you asking me this? It wasn't true anger, but rather a feeling of comfort in his heart. Other than snake, lizard, tiger, leopard, and Qingyu who knew about her rebirth, Yunjian had not told anyone since her rebirth. As for Ce, he was the first person she trusted completely and told him about it. If one were to ask for a reason, even Yunjian herself would not be able to explain it. She had just told him, and it was actually a relief to say it out loud. Ce walked over and pulled her into his embrace again without a word. This time, Yunjian did not reject him. I just want to hear you be honest with me personally, Ce said with a quirk of his handsome lips and a raised brow. Yunjian, who was in his embrace, was speechless. Yunjian and Ce did not delve into the topic. Now that the sandalwood box was involved, it was a more profound matter. With Wuxia mercenaries dead, there was no one else in kosha mercenaries who could threaten Yunjian anymore. Snake, lizard and tiger. Leopard had quickly filled in the vacant positions of Elder Booba and the others with the candidates they had chosen earlier. This way, the kosha mercenaries could continue operating. Yunjian had kept a low profile when she returned this time. She did not expect to run into Saber and Tulig on Heifei Island. As for Hua Meiling and the others, they had already been taken away. Yunjian probably wouldn't be able to see her again in this lifetime. Sometimes life was just like that. You would meet some people you got along well with on your journey, but once you said goodbye, it would be a lifetime. After dealing with the kosha mercenaries, Yunjian could finally relax. Now, the management of the kosha mercenaries would be handed over to Snake, Lizard and Tiger, Leopard. Yunjian, on the other hand, brought Qingyu back to Country Z. However, on the way back, Ce, Adam, and Mo Sen, the three of them were extremely eye-catching existences wherever they went. Yunjian could only hold her forehead and sigh softly. However, she couldn't chase Ce and the others away because she didn't want them to stay with her. Yunjian finally returned to Country Z. Under everyone's gaze, Qingyu went home to watch cartoons as soon as she returned. Yunjian and Ce went to pick up Xiao Yunju after class. During the winter break, Xiao Yunju did not have any classes, but Xiao Yunju was eager to learn, so he went to make up for it. At the same time, Yunjian was holding Xiao Yunju's hand as they walked out of the tutoring station. Xiao Yunju was still holding Yunjian's hand earlier, but when he saw Ce standing beside the Lamborghini waiting for him, he ran over to Ce with his short legs. Extending his hand, Xiao Yunju said without hesitation, "Brother Ce, you're back? You promised me that you would bring back delicious food for me." Chapter 449. After finishing his favorite KFC, Xiao Yunju was satisfied. Rubbing his full tummy, he excitedly pulled Ce with one hand and Yunjian with the other as they walked out of the KFC. Xiao Yunju held Yunjian and Ce's hands respectively as he bounced around, looking extremely excited. Xiao Yunju had been eating well these days and his skinny body was starting to grow. At least, Xiao Yunju's cheeks were now round and his petite frame had grown taller as well, almost reaching Yunjian's chest height now. "Xiao Zhu, your Ce Gij said he's bringing you to buy new clothes. You can buy as many as you want. It's almost Chinese New Year, our Xiao Zhu has to dress up beautifully." Yunjian squatted down and pinched Xiao Yunju's cheeks lightly. She pressed her lips together, a beautiful smile playing on her beautiful face. As they spoke, Yunjian could not help teasing Ce. Ce, who stood aside, did not utter a word. When did he say that? Yay, new clothes. Xiao Zhu wants to buy new clothes. Xiao Yunzhu grabbed Yunjian and Siyi's hands excitedly and jumped up and down. Siyi felt inexplicably refreshed when he saw how happy Xiao Yunzhu was and how Yunjian was smiling sincerely as well. Looking at the black watch on his wrist, Siyi's lips curled into a smirk as he said frivolously, "Let's go." It was only then that the three of them made their way to Longmen City's shopping mall. The clothes that Xiao Yunzhu was wearing should be bought at the children's store. When Yunjian and Siyi walked out of the store with a big bag of Xiao Yunzhu's clothes, they bumped into Chuning at the entrance. Longmen City was only so big and Yunjian had not been to the military training camp recently as the Chinese New Year was approaching. It was not surprising that they bumped into Chuning here. Chuning was currently holding on to a middle-aged woman who was rather plump and well-proportioned. The moment she saw Yunjian, Chuning ran over with the middle-aged woman. "Yunjian, I didn't expect to see you here." Chuning had just spoken when she was suddenly captivated by Xiao Yunzhu's exquisite face. "Little brother, it's you." Chuning squatted down and pinched Xiao Yunzhu's cheeks like Yunjian did before she exclaimed. Chuning had met both Siyi and Xiao Yunzhu before. However, her memory of Xiao Yunzhu was still stuck at the little boy Yunjian had saved when they were hiking on Weiwu Mountain in Jinglian town. She did not pay much attention to him back then, but she heard that Yunjian had adopted him. "Hello, Jejia." Xiao Yunzhu greeted Chuning politely. "Hee hee, you're so cute." Chuning chuckled at Xiao Yunzhu and stood up. She turned to introduce Yunjian and the rest to the middle-aged woman standing beside her before turning back to introduce the middle-aged woman. "This is my mom." The middle-aged woman was Chuning's mother, Wan Hui. Wan Hui had heard from her daughter, Chuning, about Yunjian's performance in the special forces early on. In particular, her daughter, Chuning, kept telling her that Team Monarch's great achievements were all thanks to Yunjian. Therefore, when Chuning introduced her as Yunjian, Wan Hui quickly greeted her. "Hello, young lady." They soon got to know each other. Since Yunjian and Chuning were close, they went shopping together for a while. When they parted, Chuning's mother Wan Hui seemed to like Yunjian very much. She even invited Yunjian, "Young lady, come to my house when you're free." Ning Ning said that she's going out with her friends after the new year. "You're coming together, aren't you?" Yunjian then recalled that Team Monarch had planned to go out again after the new year after completing the mission of retrieving the jade pendant from Peter. And this time, they were allowed to bring their relatives and friends along for the trip. If Wan Hui had not mentioned it, Yunjian would have forgotten about it. Chapter 450. After bidding farewell to Chuning and Wan Hui, Yunjian held Xiao Yunzhu's hand while Xiao Yunzhu held Siyi's hand with his other hand as they walked towards the garage. It was already 6 or 7 in the evening and the sky darkened quickly in winter. Yunjian and Siyi brought Xiao Yunzhu to the garage. After starting the car, the two of them brought Xiao Yunzhu home. The days before the new year passed quickly and before long, it was the eve of the new year. Siyi had never celebrated the new year. He was born into a military family and his father, Si Chu, did not care much about him and usually did not care whether he was dead or alive. Therefore, Si had never celebrated the new year even though he had lived for 19 years. 3 days before the new year, Si returned to an Hun organization. Before he left, Yunjian reminded him to remember to rush back on the night of the new year. They were a family, so it was natural for them to celebrate the new year together. The word family warmed Siyi's heart. After he promised Yunjian, he left with Adam and Mo Senator. There were many things waiting for him in an Hun organization. After all, it was an assassin organization, but unlike the kosher mercenaries, he could not just sit around and do nothing all day long like Yunjian. The kosher mercenaries issued missions on the website and all they had to do was contact the employer and complete the mission. An Hun organization, on the other hand, trained batches of assassins and secret agents. Naturally, this was different. Su Zetian's injuries were recovering at an astonishing speed. He could now return to Falcon Hall to handle some matters that required him to think and not do with his hands with the help of his wife, Lin Wanru. On the night of the Spring Festival, everyone went back to their homes and gathered in one place. Qin Yiru planned to bring Yunjian, Yunyi and Xiao Yunzhu back to her parents' home in town for the new year. After all, she was a native of Xinjiang town. Of course, they had to go home on New Year's Eve. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Yunjian packed her things and prepared to return to the countryside with Qin Yiru. She held Xiao Yunju's hand and waited at home for a long time, but Ce did not return. In the end, she left a note in Ce's room and followed Qin Yiru on the bus back to Xinjiang town. Grandma Zhang Meihua's attitude towards Qin Yiru and Yun Jian had been much more restrained since the last time they met. Especially when she heard from Qin Fengfeng's family that Yun Jian was the director of new cruise. When she first heard this, Zhang Meihua was dumbfounded on the spot. She had never imagined that her most insignificant granddaughter would become the director of New Cruise, a company that had stirred up a storm in the country. Zhang Meihua had been bragging about this for a long time. She had even bragged about it in front of her distant relatives. However, Zhang Meihua did not tell them that Yun Jian was the director of New Cruise because her fourth child, Qin Fengfeng, had told her that Yun Jian did not like people spreading the news. Zhang Meihua loved to suck up to Yun Jian now. She was still waiting for Yun Jian to take care of her when she was old. The news of Yun Jian starting a company had already spread in Xinjiang town. Qin Yiru naturally knew about it too. When she first found out, she had asked Yun Jian about it. Yun Jian had said that she knew Mayor Gu and gave him a good proposal to invest in the company. Qin Yiru believed this lie without a doubt and did not ask further. Actually, if Qin Yiru had asked further, Yun Jian might have spilled the beans. When Qin Yiru brought Yun Jian, Yun Yi and Xiao Yunju back to Xinjiang town, Zhang Meihua's family had already prepared a banquet. Everyone in the town would treat their distant relatives and neighbors to a meal before the new year. Seeing that Qin Yiru had brought Yun Jian and the rest home, someone immediately spoke to Yun Jian, but the words were directed at Zhang Meihua. Meihua, is she your granddaughter Yun Jian? She's starting a company at such a young age? Ha! That's amazing. This person spoke eloquently, but judging from his tone, he had no intention of praising Yun Jian. Chapter 451. Isn't that so? My Jian is amazing. Zhang Meihua's face was plastered with a wide grin as she quickly responded to the person. Her tone made it sound like she was close to Yun Jian. Even the way she addressed her had turned into an intimate Jian. Yun Jian did not hear Zhang Meihua's boasting, even if the latter was bragging about herself to others. When Qin Yiru and her were in trouble back then, Zhang Meihua had not been so nice. Back then, Zhang Meihua had acted as if she did not want to acknowledge Qin Yiru as her daughter for the rest of her life. Now that Yun Jian's capabilities were exposed, Zhang Meihua had learned to suck up to her. Yun Jian had never cared about people like her. If Zhang Meihua was not Qin Yiru's biological mother and Qin Yiru was not a person who valued relationships, she would not have treated Zhang Meihua as her biological mother. To Qin Yiru, no matter how her own mother treated her, she would not ignore Zhang Meihua forever. A person's nature was determined. Qin Yiru was a kind person. Yun Jian could only accept it. Qin Yiru was her mother. In Yun Jian's heart, Qin Yiru was someone who was worth protecting for the rest of her life. Zhang Meihua's family had set up 3 tables of food and wine tonight to entertain their distant relatives and neighbors. This was a custom in Xinjiang town as well as Longmen City. A few days before the new year, they would use pig's head and various dishes to worship the gods. After the worship, the sumptuous dishes would be used to entertain their relatives and friends to enjoy together. This was a superstition passed down from the older generation. At the same time, it was also a way to keep in touch with distant relatives and neighbors. After all, some distant relatives could no longer be contacted after the older generation passed away. At this moment, the 3 tables of dishes were almost full. Yiru, come sit here. At this time, Zhang Meihua waved at Qin Yiru and signaled for Qin Yiru to bring Yun Jian and the others to sit at the table where the man who said that Yun Jian had founded her own company at such a young age was sitting. The other 2 tables were already full, and only that table had a few empty seats left. In order to express her goodwill to Yun Jian, Zhang Meihua even personally brought over the bowls and chopsticks for Yun Jian and the others. Oh, okay, Mom. Qin Yiru rarely saw Zhang Meihua being so protective of her, so she quickly took the child and sat over. Since Qin Yiru had gone over, Yun Jian naturally wouldn't stand alone. She held Xiao Yunju's hand and sat down next to Yun Yi. The table could seat more than a dozen people, so with the addition of Qin Yiru and the others, it was already full. Zhang Meihua squeezed herself in and purposely squeezed herself next to Yun Jian's seat, acting like she was close to her. Jian, he's your uncle. Your uncle is a high-ranking official in Zhe province. Your uncle praised you just now. He said that you're amazing. Zhang Meihua could not help going over to Yun Jian to introduce the person who praised her just now to Yun Jian once she sat down. The person who praised Yun Jian was Yun Jian's uncle, Qin Yiru's cousin, Qin Li. Now that he was in Yun Jian's generation, he was considered a distant relative of Qin Li's. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell what Zhang Meihua had said just now. She was sucking up to Yun Jian but had pointed out a point in a roundabout way. Qin Li was a high-ranking official in Jia province. It was already a compliment for someone like him to say that Yun Jian was amazing. Chapter 452. In fact, Qin Li did look down on Yun Jian. It could even be said that Qin Li looked down on Zhang Meihua's family. Qin Li's father and Zhang Meihua were siblings, so Zhang Meihua's generation had plenty of siblings as well. When it was Yun Jian's generation, these people were no longer as close as they used to be. They were considered distant relatives now, but it was hard to say if they could maintain their relationship in the future. Qin Li, on the other hand, was always boasting about his status as a high-ranking official. Especially during the reunion dinner during Chinese New Year or when relatives gathered like today, it was a time to show off one's status. It was one thing for everyone to sit down and have dinner together. Of course, it was more important to talk about what one had done this year or how much one's income was. Comparisons were unavoidable. Especially those who had a higher income, they would think that they were superior while those who had a lower income and did not have a high status in society would feel inferior in comparison. Qin Li was the type of person who wanted to show off his status and high income in front of his distant relatives. As for why he looked down on Zhang Meihua's family, it was because in Qin Li's impression of his father's younger sister, Zhang Meihua's generation, there had never been a capable person. Unlike his own line of descent. Which one of them did not have excellent grades, get into a good high school or university, and finally get a decent job? In fact, other than Yun Jian, Zhang Meihua and the rest did not seem to notice Qin Li's disdain for Zhang Meihua's family at all and fawned over Qin Li even more. Yun Jian, on the other hand, ignored Zhang Meihua's words. Zhang Meihua's intention was clear. She wanted her to fawn over Qin Li and suck up to him as well. By doing so, it was like Zhang Meihua was introducing Yun Jian to an important figure like Qin Li. With this, Zhang Meihua thought that Yun Jian would owe her a favor. However, she did not expect Yun Jian to not give her any face. Jian, your uncle is praising you. Aren't you going to say something? Zhang Meihua urged when she saw that Yun Jian did not give her face. As she spoke, Zhang Meihua even winked at Qin Yiru, as if she wanted Qin Yiru to tell Yun Jian to be obedient. However, Qin Yiru did not notice Zhang Meihua's frown. Qin Yiru thought that Zhang Meihua's eyes were hurting. She asked Zhang Meihua in confusion and worry, "Mom, what's wrong with you? Are your eyes hurting?" "It's fine." When Zhang Meihua heard what Qin Yiru said, she was so angry that her breathing quickened. She shouted at Qin Yiru angrily. In such a situation, Zhang Meihua couldn't speak carelessly. However, just when Zhang Meihua thought that Yun Jian wouldn't say a word, Zhang Meihua suddenly stopped talking. Yun Jian's lips curled up slightly as she looked at Qin Li, who was sitting opposite her. Their gazes met, but she was not inferior to him at all. "Thank you for the compliment," Yun Jian replied with a press of her lips. If Qin Li's compliment of Yun Jian just now was extremely hypocritical, then Yun Jian's rebuttal was as distant as it could be. Even Qin Li, who was sitting opposite of Yun Jian, could not help taking a few more glances at Yun Jian when they heard what she said. In spite of it, she was only slightly capable. It was already impressive enough for someone her age to be able to start a small company. Chapter 453. In short, Qin Li did not take Yun Jian seriously at all. Of course, he would not say this in front of everyone present. After a sumptuous dinner, Qin Yiru and Zhang Meihua went to clean up the plates and utensils used for dinner. Since it was Zhang Meihua's family who had invited them, other than Qin Yiru and the other women who were cleaning up the leftover utensils, the rest of them sat on the bench in the yard to brag about their abilities. "Qin Li, you've earned quite a bit this year, haven't you? Haha, you've been promoted twice already. You can catch up to the position of Jia Province's chief of administration now," someone said to Qin Li with deep envy. Hearing this, Qin Li's pride immediately came out. However, his words were very low-key. "How could that be? I'm still working hard. I don't know how far I can go. This road is getting harder and harder to walk." Yun Jian and the other children of the same age stood on the side and chatted with the adults. It was only when this group of adults started to talk about their children that they started to brag about their children's abilities. Our Huaner is in his 3rd year of high school now. He just took part in a national taekwondo competition not too long ago. Fortunately, he didn't embarrass himself. He more or less won the 3rd prize, Qinli said. When Qinli said this, he purposely glanced at his son, Qin Huan. There was an indescribable sense of pride in his tone. Winning the 3rd prize in a national taekwondo competition? Old Qin, it's not that I want to criticize your son, but he's really talented in taekwondo. Someone chimed in. After all, in the eyes of the commoners, a child's performance was already impressive if he could win a place in Longmen City or Zhe Province. It was a great honor for Qin Li's son, Qin Huan, to win a prize in a national taekwondo competition. On the other hand, Qin Huan grinned from ear to ear after being praised. Qin Huan was Qin Li's son and he was 18 this year. Because of his good family background, Qin Huan had always walked in front of other children since he was young. He had been practicing taekwondo since he was young. Today, to be able to achieve such results, it was already enough to show off in front of a group of ignorant relatives and friends. Yun Jian stood at the side. She merely watched the commotion indifferently and remained silent. That was until Qin Li called his son, Qin Huan, over to show everyone some taekwondo. Qin Huan stood arrogantly in front of everyone and practiced a few moves that he usually practiced. In Qin Huan's opinion, it was already very impressive for him to get the 3rd prize in the national competition at such a young age. After Qin Huan finished this taekwondo move, he received applause from everyone present. He even reached out to stroke his short hair to show off his domineering demeanor. TSK. Was that all? Why don't you compete with Yun Jian? She's amazing. At this moment, Qin Fenger's mocking voice suddenly rang out. Qin Fenger was present and had been since the beginning. She was the daughter of Yun Jian's uncle in name, Qin Liqian, and this house belonged to Qin Liqian. Qin Fenger was not studying during the Lunar New Year, so of course she was present. It was just that she did not sit at the same table as Yun Jian in the beginning, so she did not match up to her boss. In fact, after being intimidated by Yun Jian's hypnosis last time, Qin Fenger had grown increasingly disgusted with Yun Jian. Seeing how good Qin Huan's taekwondo moves were, Qin Fenger suddenly thought that Yun Jian seemed to know a thing or two too. Chapter 454. Qin Huan was someone who had won the 3rd prize in the National Youth Taekwondo competition. Just based on this, Yun Jian couldn't compare to him. That was why Qin Fenger suddenly thought of letting Yun Jian go up and fight with Qin Huan. Moreover, she purposely praised Yun Jian and made Qin Huan think that Yun Jian also practiced taekwondo. Qin Huan was competitive. Qin Fenger's motive was to let Qin Huan think that Yun Jian had some ability and stimulate his inner competitive spirit to fight with Yun Jian. It would be best if he could cripple Yun Jian. It would be best if he could disfigure her face. Qin Fenger was most jealous of Yun Jian's appearance. As expected, the moment Qin Fenger said that Yun Jian was amazing, Qin Huan immediately sized up Yun Jian. Not only Qin Huan, but everyone present turned to look at Yun Jian. Moreover, all of them had a shocked expression on their faces. Yun Jian knew taekwondo? Previously, when they heard Zhang Meihua say that Yun Jian had started her own company, everyone was already shocked. In the end, from Qin Fenger's words, he could hear even more misunderstandings. Yun Jian knew taekwondo? She looked so thin and weak, but she actually knew taekwondo? You know taekwondo? Qin Huan, who was still in high spirits, was now standing in front of Yun Jian. He looked at Yun Jian and at the same time, used his tall and burly figure to look down on Yun Jian. His expression was as if he didn't care that Yun Jian also knew taekwondo. Yun Jian didn't say a word and was ridiculed for no reason. She crossed her arms and glanced at Qin Fenger. There was a sharp and murderous glint in her eyes. Under everyone's gaze, Yun Jian pursed her red lips slightly. Her half-smile, coupled with her exquisite and beautiful face, made people suffocate for a moment. Qin Fenger, who was standing at the side, dug her nails into her flesh. What she hated the most was Yun Jian's face. That's right, I do know taekwondo. Yun Jian shrugged and turned back to look at Qin Fenger. Just because Qin Fenger could glare at others, did she think that Yun Jian could not glare at others? Then let's have a match, Qin Huan said excitedly. Qin Huan felt that he had just performed a few taekwondo punches in front of everyone, but it still wasn't impressive enough. It had to be like a taekwondo competition. Only by knocking down the opponent would it give people a sense of awe. But Qin Huan had no opponent, so he could only fight. Coincidentally, at this moment, Yun Jian said that she knew taekwondo. Hence, Qin Huan immediately came over to request a match. After saying that, Qin Huan felt that he was being rude again. He confidently added to Yun Jian, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you." This sentence proved that Qin Huan completely believed that he would definitely win if he competed with Yun Jian in taekwondo. "Come." Upon hearing Qin Huan's words, Yun Jian, who originally didn't want to fight, spoke up. Then, she paused and tilted her head to look at Qin Huan under everyone's gaze. She said in disdain, "I'll say the ugly words first. I won't go easy on you." These words were considered a rebuttal to Qin Huan's arrogant words that said that he would definitely win. But after Qin Huan heard it, he was a little angry. He was the third prize winner of the National Youth Taekwondo competition. But today, he was actually looked down on by a skinny girl? Hence, after Yun Jian said those words, Qin Huan reached out and punched. He rushed towards Yun Jian as fast as he could and muttered, "Then I won't hold back." Qin Huan struck a few standard taekwondo moves. Just as he was about to raise his hand to suppress Yun Jian's arm, suddenly, a pair of hands that were as agile as a snake stretched out simply. Yun Jian held Xiao Yunju's hand and didn't move. One of her hands went around Qin Huan like a snake's body and went straight to his abdomen. Just as he thought that Yun Jian was going to punch him, Yun Jian suddenly kicked him horizontally. Bam! When everyone blinked again, they saw the aggressive Qin Huan being sent sprawling on the floor by Yun Jian in the next second. Chapter 455. After Yun Jian said this, she glared at Qin Huan, who was lying on the ground. She held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked over to Yun Yi's side. Yun Jian didn't use any strength in this move. It wasn't that she looked down on Qin Huan, but if his fancy, complicated, and impractical moves were to be used internationally, he would be beaten unconscious countless times. Ah! Qin Huan, who was knocked to the ground by Yun Jian, stood up with widened eyes in shock. He stared at Yun Jian in utter shock, as if he could not believe what had just happened. He didn't even know when she made her move. He was already lying on the ground. In contrast to Qin Huan's shock, Qin Li, who was proud of his son and bragging in front of his relatives and friends, was also stunned. All the relatives and friends present were dumbfounded. Everyone sucked in a deep breath. Especially those who felt that Yun Jian had founded a company at such a young age and looked down on Yun Jian because of Zhang Meihua's bragging. At this moment, they couldn't help but size up Yun Jian. Everyone knew that Qin Huan was the third prize winner of the National Youth Taekwondo competition. To be able to win a prize at the National Taekwondo competition was an amazing thing. But just now, a young lady subdued him in one move. That wasn't all. Yun Jian even directly pointed out that Qin Huan's moves were fancy and that he wasn't even worthy of being her opponent. What an arrogant and powerful young lady. As for the instigator, Qin Fenger, who was standing at the side, her eyes were about to pop out. How was that possible? How could Yun Jian defeat Qin Huan? Wait. At this moment, Qin Huan suddenly ran over to stop Yun Jian when he saw that she was about to stand to the side with Xiao Yunju. What? Yun Jian raised her brows and smiled. She didn't let go of Xiao Yunju's hand. Xiao Yunju also blinked his black eyes and sized up Qin Huan. He looked left and right at Qin Huan and shook his little head. This person was so ugly that he couldn't even be compared to his brother Ce. Qin Huan, who was being criticized by Xiao Yunju, didn't know what Xiao Yunju was thinking. He looked at Yun Jian with a serious expression. Qin Huan gritted his teeth and said, "How can you defeat me? I wasn't ready just now. I want to compete with you again." When Qin Huan said this, there was a sense of confidence that came from nowhere. Yun Jian's words just now had completely touched his pride as a man. Qin Huan felt that his manly pride had been severely insulted. Therefore, he wanted Yun Jian to compete with him again. "And what you used just now wasn't a taekwondo move. I want to compete with you in taekwondo, not other unorthodox ways." In order to win, Qin Huan continued, "Do you dare to compete with me?" Just now, Yun Jian defeated him in one move. This made Qin Huan feel that he had lost face in front of all his relatives. Therefore, Qin Huan was trying to make up for his embarrassment just now. Moreover, he was trying to convey to the surrounding people that he lost just now because Yun Jian didn't use Taekwondo to fight with him. Although this reason was ridiculous, the surrounding relatives immediately helped Qin Huan. After all, most of the people present thought that boys had a better future than girls. No matter how powerful Yun Jian was, she was just a girl. His future achievements would always be limited. Chapter 456. With Qin Fenger's nonsense, Qin Huan became even more confident. Qin Huan suddenly felt that Yun Jian was using unorthodox methods to defeat him. After all, her hand speed was so fast just now, and she wasn't using Taekwondo. If it was Taekwondo moves, Qin Huan was very confident that he could defeat Yun Jian. Because he had learned Taekwondo very well, including what moves his opponent would use, he had learned from his coach. At the same time, he also studied what moves his opponent would use and how he should defend against them. It could be said that Qin Huan was full of confidence within the range of Taekwondo moves. Therefore, in order to regain his face, he invited Yun Jian to fight again. He was a national youth Taekwondo expert. If it was Taekwondo, could she do it? When Yun Jian heard Qin Huan's words, she couldn't help but chuckle. She was already merciful just now, but Qin Huan actually used the excuse that she didn't use Taekwondo moves to fight with him. He wanted to fight with her again? Fight again? Yun Jian raised her brows. She smiled slightly, but her smile was full of disdain. That's right. Seeing the surrounding relatives looking at him, Qin Huan wasn't willing to accept the fact that he couldn't even defeat a thin girl like Yun Jian. Therefore, Qin Huan nodded fiercely. Seeing Qin Huan like this, Qin Li, who was standing at the side, knew that his son was serious. Huan, be gentle. Don't hurt the little girl, Qin Li even said to Qin Huan. Dad, of course. Qin Huan nodded confidently as if he had already won against Yun Jian when he said this. Qin Li and Qin Huan were indeed father and son. It was really unknown where their confidence came from. Yun Jian only smiled contemptuously. She handed Xiao Yunju's hand to her brother, Yun Yi, and let Yun Yi hold on to Xiao Yunju. Brother, hold on to Xiao Yunju first. With that, Yun Jian walked towards Qin Huan. Her long and narrow eyelashes fluttered up and down, and her delicate and beautiful face was as smooth as water. Her delicate and clean face caused everyone present to be stunned once again. Yun Jian's looks were indeed stunning. Otherwise, Yuan Ying-jun wouldn't have been so obsessed with her back then. However, they saw the stunning girl standing in front of a group of people in the open space in Zhang Meihua's front yard. As she spoke, she blew out a breath of warm air. Reaching out, Yun Jian hooked her finger at Qin Huan. No matter how many times you try, whether it's Taekwondo, Sanda, or any other martial arts, as long as you can survive one move from me, you win. These words were considered a ruthless slap to Qin Huan's face. Yun Jian meant that he wouldn't even be able to take a single blow from her. Qin Huan spat fiercely, but he didn't have Yun Jian's boldness. He didn't dare to tell Yun Jian that as long as she could withstand one of his moves, she would win. Because from Yun Jian's moves just now, he could tell that she wasn't weak either. Ha! Qin Huan focused all his attention and roared. He clenched his fist and punched Yun Jian with all his might. This punch was much more powerful than the one Qin Huan used just now. Yun Jian's eyes flickered. She didn't move and watched as Qin Huan clenched his fist and rushed towards her. When Qin Huan's fist was only 10 centimeters away from her, Yun Jian suddenly tilted her head. She squatted down and spun around. In the next second, she actually circled behind Qin Huan in a strange posture. After that, Yun Jian lifted her leg and used an extremely standard Taekwondo move to kick Qin Huan from behind to the ground. Everyone was stunned. Yun Jian's speed was simply unparalleled. It was much faster than the first time she beat Qin Huan up. So it turned out that she didn't display her true strength just now. Qin Huan was once again kicked to the ground like a dog gnawing on mud. At this moment, Yun Jian, who was standing behind Qin Huan, stretched out her slender right index finger in front of the astonished crowd. She smiled slightly and said with contempt, "One move." Chapter 457. Yun Jian didn't use any Taekwondo moves just now, so Qin Huan found an excuse and even boasted that she wouldn't be able to win against him without using any Taekwondo moves. At this moment, Qin Huan was speechless. In fact, Qin Huan, who was beaten down, was also stunned. He was beaten down by Yun Jian once again. And this time, everyone's eyes were bright. Everyone saw that Yun Jian had indeed used taekwondo moves to defeat him. Qin Huan completely broke down. He had been learning taekwondo since he was young, but now, he couldn't even compare to a girl who was smaller and weaker than him. If this were to spread, where would his face go? Qin Fenger, who originally wanted to use Qin Huan's ability to make Yun Jian suffer, was even more desperate. She gritted her teeth and glared at Yun Jian from the side. All right. It's just a small fight between two children. It's fine if you win or lose. Qin Huan, you're a man. It's normal for you to give in to a girl. Now, come and eat an apple. This apple is freshly cut. It's very fresh. At this moment, a plump middle-aged woman carrying a plate of freshly cut fruit walked out of the house and spoke as she walked. As she spoke, she called a group of people to eat the small pieces of apple. This middle-aged woman had just seen how Yun Jian subdued Qin Huan in one move. But after the shock, she was very calm. In an instant, this plump middle-aged woman, who was half a head shorter than Yun Jian, thought of the competition between Qin Huan and Yun Jian. It was probably because Qin Huan was Yun Jian's elder brother according to seniority that he let Yun Jian win. This was what the middle-aged woman thought, so she directly said it out loud. After all, in this day and age, whether it was the villagers or the people in the city, they were used to elder brothers and sisters giving in to younger brothers and sisters. Sometimes, even if it wasn't the case, they would still say it was the case. Just like how Yun Jian had beaten Qin Huan twice just now. In the eyes of this group of relatives, this plump middle-aged woman's words made them think that Qin Huan let Yun Jian win because he let her win. However, only Qin Huan himself knew how terrifying Yun Jian's strength was just now. After hearing what the middle-aged woman said, the crowd really thought that Qin Huan had gone easy on Yun Jian, which was why Yun Jian won. Yun Jian just sneered at this. It was also at this time that the countryside's idea of favoring boys over girls, and that boys were always better than girls, was completely reflected. Yun Jian had lived at the pinnacle of the world in her previous life. She had never experienced such a feeling before. However, it was undeniable that this feeling was definitely not pleasant. But Yun Jian didn't care about that. Yun Jian didn't say anything. She walked straight to Xiao Yunju and held Xiao Yunju's hand. A hurried voice could be heard. Aya, I'm late. I'm sorry, everyone. Hearing the sound, he looked over and saw a police officer in uniform. It was obvious that he had just gotten off work and hadn't had time to take off his uniform. Seeing the person in police uniform, everyone was in awe out of habit. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. She was stunned when she saw this familiar face that suddenly appeared. When the other party saw Yun Jian, he was also shocked. Then, this male police officer suddenly pointed at Yun Jian and exclaimed in front of everyone, "Little girl, it's you. Aren't you the Advanced Special Forces soldier under Officer Gu?" Chapter 458. The police officer's name was Zhang Shun. He was a police officer working at Xinjiang Town's police station. He was also the police officer that Yun Jian had met when she visited Lu Fian and her mother at the police station to visit Lu Fian's father. It was just that he didn't think that he would be able to meet her here. Yun Jian was only slightly stunned before she nodded at Zhang Shun. Zhang Shun was actually Qin Li's brother-in-law. He worked at Xinjiang Town's police station and had an easy life. Come to think of it, Zhang Shun and Zhang Meihua were considered distant relatives. Even Zhang Shun was not related to Yun Jian by blood. Zhang Meihua had invited all her family and friends in Xinjiang Town to a banquet, and Zhang Shun was one of the invitees. Unfortunately, Zhang Shun had just gotten off work and could not make it for dinner. Advanced Special Forces? Brother-in-law, what did you say? She is an Advanced Special Forces soldier? Qin Li and the others who were listening suddenly realized this. Qin Li turned to Zhang Shun and asked in horror. The moment everyone heard that Yun Jian was an Advanced Special Forces soldier, they were so shocked that their mouths were agape. Everyone was waiting for Zhang Shun's reply. Zhang Shun obviously did not realize anything as he spoke even more highly of Yun Jian. Hey, are you surprised? When I first found out that she's an Advanced Special Forces soldier, my reaction was similar to yours. But don't think that she's a member of the Advanced Special Forces under Officer Gu just because she's young. This is an honor that others might not be able to achieve, even if they work hard their entire lives. As he spoke, Zhang Shun took the opportunity to exclaim, "Do you know who Officer Gu is? He's Country Z's military genius. Even the country's general manager would want to get close to him." Gu Yunjian's status in Country Z was very high and Yun Jian knew that too. However, from the words of others, he could hear a different flavor. Boom! Everyone present felt like their heads were about to explode. Yun Jian actually had such an identity. She was actually an advanced special forces soldier. At that moment, Qin Li was dumbfounded while everyone else was shocked. Qin Huan was completely stunned on the spot. It was no wonder that his skills were not good enough for her. No wonder she said that he wasn't worthy of being her opponent. She was an advanced special forces soldier. With such an identity, Yun Jian was destined to be different from the rest. Qin Huan was only good at taekwondo. Compared to the special forces in the army, he couldn't be compared at all. After all, no matter how good taekwondo was, the chances of actual combat were few and far between. On the other hand, the amount of training for an ordinary special forces soldier was enough to strike fear into the hearts of taekwondo practitioners. There was simply no comparison between the two. Especially those who had been in the army, they would have a murderous aura. What's wrong? Zhang Shun found that after he finished speaking, the people around him were dumbfounded, and he asked in confusion. If Zhang Shun knew that this group of people thought that Qin Huan had lost to Yun Jian on purpose and that Qin Huan had given in to Yun Jian, he might have laughed out loud on the spot. Yun Jian was an advanced special forces soldier who was personally certified by Gu Junjian. Such a young advanced special forces soldier. Did she need someone like Qin Huan to give in to her? Wasn't this a joke? At that moment, other than Qin Li, Qin Huan, and the rest whose faces were terrifyingly dark, the middle-aged woman who was holding the fruit platter and giving everyone slices of apple slices was also slapped hard in the face. Chapter 459. By the time everyone realized what was going on, Qin Yiru, Zhang Meihua, and the other women had already finished washing the dishes and cleaning the table. They walked to the empty space in front of the courtyard. What's going on? Why are all of you dumbfounded? What are you doing? Zhang Meihua and the other women asked in confusion when they saw the group of people standing in the open space staring at Yun Jian like they were in a daze. Mom, Yun Jian is an advanced special forces soldier. Do you know about this? Qin Liqian exclaimed and pointed at Yun Jian at Zhang Meihua. Advanced special forces soldier? Zhang Meihua and the other women who came out of the house were stunned as well. Other than Qin Yiru and Yun Yi who knew about it, everyone else was dumbfounded. How old was Yun Jian? She's only 15 years old. Advanced Special Forces Soldier? This was a title that had nothing to do with her at all. But now, this title followed closely by her side. Zhang Shun understood the reason when he saw the group's reaction. They did not believe that Yun Jian was an Advanced Special Forces soldier. To convince them that Yun Jian was an Advanced Special Forces soldier, Zhang Shun added, "The documents are here. I saw it with my own eyes. Officer Gu issued it himself." Even if the group did not believe it, they had no choice but to believe it. After that, the relatives looked at Yun Jian in a different way. There were a few older students like Yun Jian and Yun Yi present. They were the children of their relatives. They had brought them over because it was winter break. However, the young men and women who were about the same age as Yun Jian were silent throughout the meal. Before Yun Jian's appearance, Qin Huan was undoubtedly the most outstanding one in the group. Yun Jian's appearance immediately became the center of attention. From hearing that she had started a company to hearing that she was an advanced special forces soldier, everyone's emotions changed bit by bit. Although Yun Jian's identity as an advanced special forces soldier shocked everyone, it did not last long. Adults always like to brag about their own abilities. Therefore, after bragging about their own children's abilities, they began to talk about who had a car. Look over there. My family's car was bought from New Cruise. Including taxes and a series of documents, it cost about 100,000. A rich man boasted in front of everyone. Now, New Cruise had become the spokesperson for the automobile sales company that everyone was talking about. At the same time, Zhang Xiaofan had further acquired some smaller car sales companies to expand the company's authority. I'm planning to get a new car in a few days, Qin Li chimed in. Perhaps he could only find his sense of honor when it came to money and status. As for Yun Jian, she was more capable than her son, Qin Huan, but she had only started a small company. What use was? Old Qin, I have some dealings with New Cruise's CEO. Why don't I help you ask him out to tell you about the different models of cars in New Cruise? Someone could not help asking Qin Li. The chairman of New Cruise was Yun Jian while the CEO was Zhang Zhifan. Sure. That's a good idea. I was just worried that no one would give me a suggestion on what kind of car to buy. Qin Li pretended to be profound as he spoke. Qin Li clearly believed that not many people in the group could understand what he was saying. He wanted them to not understand so that he could continue boasting. I suggest you buy a Volkswagen. It's a local brand. New Cruise will have a Volkswagen promotion in a few days. Yun Jian suddenly chimed in. Half of Qin Li's reason for saying that was to show off. In spite of it, Yun Jian's sudden suggestion left him dumbfounded. Chapter 460. It was apparent that Yun Jian's words just now had made the person who was speaking feel a little smug about what she had just said feel repulsed. Especially since Yun Jian was so young, the person felt that Yun Jian was bossing others around and stealing his limelight at such a young age. He was even more displeased with her. Don't spout nonsense when you're still a kid. New Cruise isn't just any company. Besides, I have a friend who works in New Cruise. Of course, my friend would be the first to know if New Cruise is having an event. He'll definitely tell me the moment he gets the news. The person was full of confidence as he refuted Yun Jian's words with a rather arrogant tone. Moreover, the person's meaning was obvious. His friend worked in New Cruise. Even his friend had never heard of what Yun Jian said. Yun Jian was just spouting nonsense. Yun Jian turned to look at the man who accused her of spouting nonsense. He was about middle-aged with shifty-eyed eyes. Coupled with a face that was not even close to being handsome, he sent chills down one's spine just by looking at him. What was worse was that this person had red pustules on his face. He looked like he was not satisfied with his desires. Yun Jian glared at him and did not say anything else. Her words were directed at Qin Li, not this man who looked like he was not satisfied with his desires. Of course, it was not her business whether Qin Li listened to her or not. She was merely giving him a piece of advice. Qin Li was obviously stunned as well. However, compared to the shifty-eyed man who looked like he was not satisfied with his desires, Qin Li's gaze had a deeper depth to it. Then they went on with their own words. Yun Jian, who was standing far away, could still hear the man who looked like he was complaining about her to the people around him. Say, even though she's in the advanced special forces at such a young age, she shouldn't think that she's invincible. What kind of company is New Cruise? It's a famous company in the country. She's just a little girl. Do you think she can reach into New Cruise? The dissatisfied man deliberately spoke loudly, as if he wanted everyone present to hear him reprimand Yun Jian, so that he could embarrass her. At this moment, Qin Yiru was also feeling rather awkward. Zhang Meihua opened her mouth. If not for Yun Jian's silence, Zhang Meihua would have revealed Yun Jian's identity as New Cruise's director. However, Yun Jian didn't say anything, and Zhang Meihua didn't dare to say anything. She was still waiting for Yun Jian to take care of her when she was old. How could he offend her so quickly? Yun Jian and her brother, Yun Yi, stood together. From time to time, she would tease Xiao Yunju, feeling very comfortable. It was as if what had just happened had never happened. Soon, the last trace of the golden sunset on the horizon had also disappeared. The sky was completely dark. The crowd had yet to disperse. Today was New Year's Eve, and every family was staying up late. The night of staying up late was long, so the adults had already set up the table and started playing mahjong at Zhang Meihua's house. The children, on the other hand, were following the women to set off the small firecrackers they bought from the small shop outside their house. Screech! Just then, the sound of a speeding motor was heard. The roar of a sports car resounded through Xinjiang town. What's that sound? Someone was surprised. What could be so loud? Isn't that the roar of a sports car? Looks like it's a sports car. Let's go, let's stand outside and take a look. The man with a face full of lust hurriedly pulled everyone outside. Chapter 461. These days, the number of cars in town could be counted with one hand. A high-class car like a sports car was even rarer. Therefore, when they heard the sound of a sports car, everyone ran out, wanting to see what the legendary sports car looked like. Seeing the black Lamborghini slowly drive into the corridor of the courtyard, no one was surprised. After all, it was normal for cars to pass through the aisles in front of their houses. I wonder which family in town this car belongs to? This car? I think it's a Lamborghini. This kind of car, the price is no less than $1 million. The man with a dissatisfied face was called Zhu Jie. At this time, Zhu Jie was pointing at the Lamborghini slowly driving into the courtyard, arrogantly speaking to the people around him. As he spoke, Zhu Jie couldn't help but sigh. This kind of car, if I could touch it in my life, it would be great. Hearing these words directly, outsiders would really think that Zhu Jie was a very humble person. However, those who knew him well understood that Zhu Jie's words meant that even people like him, who knew influential people and had a good family background, couldn't touch this high-class car. His group of poor relatives couldn't even think about it. Just as everyone was staring at the black Lamborghini passing through the aisles in the courtyard and was about to drive directly past Zhang Meihua's house, the car suddenly stopped. Huh! Zhu Jie let out a word of surprise. Under everyone's gaze, the door of the Lamborghini slowly opened, and a pair of slender legs were the first to appear. Then, a relatively young man came out from the driver's seat. The man was about 18 or 19 years old. He was very young, but he had a strong aura as soon as he appeared. He had a head of black hair and a fair and handsome face, which made all the women present blush. Qin Fenger had never seen such a handsome man. She thought that she had dated many boys, but in the end, they all parted on bad terms. Even her boyfriend, who was once called the most handsome boy in school, wasn't as handsome as this man in front of her. Qin Fenger felt her heart thumping wildly. Did this man see me and stop the car? Zhu Jie couldn't help but look at the man who suddenly appeared with admiration, and couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Hello, little brother. Are you looking for directions? Zhu Jie had always been polite to rich and powerful people. When he saw Ce stop after getting out of the car, he thought that Ce was a foreigner. Now that it was the new year, there were many outsiders who went back to their hometown to give gifts to their relatives. Hence, Zhu Jie ran over, thinking himself clever, and volunteered to lead the way for Ce. F***ck off, Ce uttered softly, hating people like Zhu Jie who sucked up to him as well. Ce told Zhu Jie to get lost. However, Zhu Jie was very perceptive. Even though he saw Ce's extreme reaction, he wasn't angry. Instead, he stood aside with a smile. Zhu Jie didn't dare to say much about the slander of the rich. Ce drove a Lamborghini, so his family was naturally wealthy. Zhu Jie expressed that he would never provoke such a person in his life. However, just as everyone was waiting suspiciously for Ce to guess his next move, Ce suddenly raised his slender legs and walked in front of Yun Jian. I'm back. Ce's red lips curved. He said the most frightening thing in the world in a calm tone. Chapter 462. Only Yun Yi, Qin Yiru, and Xiao Yunju knew Ce. However, Ce walked straight to Yun Jian. It was as if Yun Jian was the only person in his deep eyes. Yes, she replied calmly to Ce. Yun Jian wasn't good at expressing her emotions, but her slightly raised eyebrows proved that she was excited. Ce Gij. Xiao Yunju took the opportunity to run from Yun Jian to Ce. Xiao Yunju was becoming more and more dependent on Ce. Every time he saw Ce, it was as if he had seen a delicious candy. He didn't even want his own sister and directly ran into Ce's arms. He was like a treasure hunter. Yun Jian, Ce, and Xiao Yunju's daily interaction stunned everyone present. They didn't hear wrongly. Zhu Jie was just bragging about the value of this Lamborghini. It definitely wasn't less than 1 million yuan. How could a person who could take out 1 million yuan to buy a car be poor? It had to be known that in 1998, things were cheaper, and the monthly income of ordinary people wasn't high. At that time, if a person's monthly income was more than 1,000 yuan, it was already considered a high income. As for people who could spend 1 million yuan to buy a luxury car, it could be said that there was no such person. Most importantly, the man driving this car was actually so familiar with Yun Jian. Yun Jian, Ce, and Xiao Yunju stood together like a family. Everyone present was stupefied. As for Zhu Jie, who had just spoken rudely to Yun Jian, he was so ashamed that he was speechless. He didn't even dare to appear in front of Yun Jian and the others. Think about how he had just insulted Yun Jian. That tone. To be honest, Zhu Jie had never thought about how successful Yun Jian would be in the future. Even if she was capable, she was just a girl. There were a lot of things that minors were limited in doing. In Zhu Jie's mind, Yun Jian was just a girl. How capable could she be in the future? However, when Zhu Jie ran to Ce to beg, he suddenly realized that Ce actually knew Yun Jian. It was Zhu Jie's first time experiencing something so embarrassing. His expression darkened instantly. However, Zhu Jie didn't say anything else. "Hey, you're here? There's still a stool left. Take a seat and rest." Qin Yiru walked over with a smile as she called out to Ce affectionately. Then, Qin Yiru asked Ce worriedly, "Hey, have you had dinner?" Ce was holding Xiao Yunju's hand. He had rushed all the way back from an Hun group because he had promised Yun Jian to come back and celebrate Chinese New Year with her. He had not rested for even a second on the way back, so of course, he hadn't eaten dinner. Ce's hair fluttered as he shook his head at Qin Yiru. "No! You child! Why didn't you tell me you were coming over? You haven't even learned how to take care of yourself." "Fine, fine. Auntie will make you some noodles. You can't starve on an empty stomach. You'll get stomach problems if you go hungry for too long." Qin Yiru reprimanded Ce like an elder reprimanding a junior before turning to make noodles for Ce. Ce's heart was warmed. The heartwarming scene between Ce, Yun Jian, and the others took on a different meaning in Qin Fenger's eyes as her envy and jealousy intensified. Chapter 463. Qin Fenger simply couldn't stand Yun Jian, so she purposely raised her voice so that her friends and relatives would take a good look at Yun Jian. It would be best if they misunderstood that Yun Jian was Ce's mistress. After all, when Ce drove his Lamborghini, everyone assumed that he was a rich man's son. Other than those rich men who could buy anything they wanted, who else could afford a sports car that cost more than $1 million? In 1998, country Z's economy had just started to take off. It was only in the 21st century that the economy started to pick up and gradually increased. The development of technology amazed everyone. However, one thing was for sure: in 1998, the prices of goods were still very cheap. "Mistress!" Before Yun Jian could say anything, Ce had already raised his eyebrows. His handsome face was as if it had been carefully sculpted, as if it was a perfect masterpiece created by God himself, without the slightest flaw. What? Isn't that the case?" Qin Fenger replied confidently. Then, she suddenly thought of something and immediately said it. "It's New Year's Eve now. Why aren't you at home? Why are you here other than for Yun Jian?" Qin Fenger's words were even more firm. It was as if she had seen the entire scene. Some people even felt that Qin Fenger's words made sense. If Yun Jian and Ce were a couple, shouldn't they have returned to Xinjiang town together? As for the current situation, Ce had driven his Lamborghini to their doorstep. Based on what you said, aren't all the people who come to your house to look for you to keep you as their mistress? Yun Jian used a very clever example to refute Qin Fenger's words. Qin Fenger's words were indeed nonsense, but there were too many loopholes in her words. In the end, Yun Jian managed to turn the tables on her and retaliate. Yun Jian's words instantly caused everyone to burst into laughter. Everyone quickly realized that Qin Fenger's words had no evidence at all. If Ce came here to look for Yun Jian, did that mean that she was his mistress? Didn't that mean that all the people who came to Qin Fenger's house were here to keep her as their mistress? It was because of Qin Fenger's simple and laughable way of thinking that everyone laughed. "Ha ha ha, little girl, you're really interesting." Someone laughed and said to Yun Jian. Yun Jian only nodded slightly and smiled. She did not change her smile. When Yun Jian said that, everyone present looked at Qin Fenger as if they were looking at an idiot. Qin Fenger was simply too brainless. How could she say something like that? Qin Fenger was trembling with anger, but she couldn't say anything in response. Qin Fenger was just talking nonsense, but she was forced by Yun Jian to the point that she couldn't say a word. She was angry, but she didn't dare to say anything. There was still Ce standing beside her. Ce was obviously from a big family. No matter how powerful Qin Fenger was, she couldn't afford to offend her. Beep beep. At this moment, a few cars suddenly drove into the courtyard. Chapter 464. Among the cars that drove in, one of them was New Cruise's hottest-selling Volkswagen sedan from Country Z. Following closely behind was a military jeep. The two cars attracted a lot of attention as they drove in. At the same time, the two cars stopped at the courtyard entrance after CE. What the hell? What's going on today? Why are there so many cars parked here? Someone could not help exclaiming when they saw the scene. Zhang Meihua's courtyard was small and narrow. Accommodating CE's Lamborghini was already its limit, so the two cars were parked some distance away from the courtyard entrance. The reason why the person exclaimed was because in previous years, there were only a few small cars that could be seen in a small place like Xinjiang town. Today, 3 cars were parked in front of Zhang Meihua's courtyard entrance, completely stunning the crowd. Zhang Xiaofan, who got out of the Volkswagen sedan, felt as though he had just made a fortune and returned home. On the other hand, Zhang Xiaofan and his brothers were originally from Xinjiang town. However, their home was still in Xinjiang town. Another tall jeep also stopped in front of them. Then, a person got out of the jeep. Yun Jian's eyes flashed. She narrowed them slightly, but there was a beautiful glow in her eyes. New Cruise's CEO. Oh my god, why is New Cruise's CEO here? Zhu Jie did not make a sound for a long time, but when Zhang Xiaofan spoke, he pointed at Zhang Xiaofan as though he had seen some shocking VIP. Hearing that Zhang Xiaofan, who had appeared out of nowhere, was New Cruise's CEO, everyone was shocked. Everyone present looked at him from head to toe. With New Cruise's recent fame and Zhang Xiaofan's hard-working management that was not afraid of hardships, New Cruise had become the representative of Country Z. There were even businesses overseas that were interested in collaborating with New Cruise. Therefore, there was no one present who did not know about New Cruise. New Cruise had become the representative of the country's automobile industry. Facing Zhang Xiaofan, the CEO of New Cruise, the group of people started to get excited. It was him. This middle-aged man was New Cruise's CEO. This news was simply too shocking. In contrast to the crowd's surprise, Zhang Xiaofan did not show any hint of arrogance. Of course, pride was a must. Hello. Qin Li was the first to reach Zhang Xiaofan. Wiping the back of his hands, he extended his hand to shake Zhang Xiaofan's hand in greeting. Qin Li's tone even carried a hint of inferiority. Hello. Zhang Xiaofan did not extend his hand to shake Qin Li's hand, nor did he express anything. Instead, he went to Yun Jian after saying that. Then, Zhang Xiaofan's respectful voice rang. Sister Jian. He was already in front of Yun Jian and nodded at Yun Jian in greeting. In spite of it, everyone present was stunned when they heard him. Zhang Xiaofan was New Cruise's CEO. This was common knowledge. Logically speaking, someone who Zhang Xiaofan addressed as sister must be his immediate superior. It was also rumored that New Cruise's CEO was a young lady. No one knew what she looked like. In spite of it, Zhang Xiaofan's greeting and what Yun Jian said earlier. Could it be that Yun Jian was the famous CEO of New Cruise? Qin Li was dumbfounded, so was Zhu Jie. Chapter 465. Yun Jian nodded. Just as everyone was stunned for a few minutes, a person also got out of the jeep that had been following the Volkswagen all the way. It was Gu Junjian. Gu Junjian was dressed in formal casual attire. Without his military uniform, Gu Junjian looked valiant. Another person got out of the Volkswagen. He carried a huge pile of New Year's gifts and walked over with Gu Junjian. Gu Junjian's hands were full as well. He carried a huge bag of expensive Torreya fragrance gifts. It was obvious that Gu Junjian and Zhang Xiaofan had come together. Both of them had rushed over on the first day of the new year to pay their New Year's greetings to Yun Jian. The person who got out of the Volkswagen was Brother He, who had represented New Cruise at the dinner party hosted by Zhang Xiaofeng's father not long ago. Brother He and Gu Junjian were walking over together. Both of them were carrying many expensive New Year's gifts. Gu Junjian had gotten to know Zhang Xiaofan through Yun Jian. Therefore, they had agreed to come to Xinjiang town to pay their New Year's greetings to Yun Jian. Gu Junjian and Zhang Xiaofan were busy people. They would be so busy after the new year that they would not have time to pay their New Year's greetings. Therefore, they had come to Yun Jian's hometown earlier to pay their New Year's greetings. Therefore, Yun Jian did not know that they would come. Gu Junjian and Brother He walked to Zhang Meihua's door and placed the huge pile of gifts by the doorsill. Everyone's eyes were glued to the gifts. They saw that the gifts that Zhang Zhifan and Gu Junjian had brought were all expensive items. For example, the bag of Torreya fragrance in Gu Yunjian's hands. Although Torreya fragrance was not the most expensive item, it was rare to see someone bring a huge bag of Torreya fragrance to pay their New Year's greetings in 1998. It was obvious that they were not ordinary people. Sister Jen, there's a lot of work to do in the company after Lunar New Year, so we're here early to wish you a Happy New Year, Zhang Zhifan explained looking at Yun Jian. Yun Jian nodded softly. At the same time, he also understood why Gu Junjian came with Zhang Zhifan. Although Gu Junjian knew where Yun Jian lived, he did not know that Yun Jian was currently in Xinjiang town. Coincidentally, Zhang Zhifan came from Xinjiang town, so he naturally knew where Yun Jian lived. Therefore, the two of them hit it off and came together to give Yun Jian a New Year's greeting. Gu Junjian was the leader of the Advanced Special Forces. His high rank meant that he had to work all year round. Now that he was free, he had delegated his work to his subordinates to spare time to pay Yun Jian a Happy New Year's visit. Yun Jian was glad to see Zhang Zhifan and Gu Junjian. Come in and have a seat. Yun Jian smiled and invited them into the house. Ce stayed by Yun Jian's side and Xiao Yunju's hand was held tightly by Ce. This was obviously Zhang Meihua's house, but it was more like Yun Jian's place to receive important guests. In spite of it, Zhang Meihua did not say a word. This was New Cruise's CEO. Zhang Meihua could not wait to suck up to him. How could she not be happy? After making tea for the group, Zhang Meihua asked for tea eggs to be cooked for them. At that moment, Qin Li, Zhu Jia, and the others were ignored like they were outsiders. Chapter 466. The fearful voice came from Zhang Shun. Who was Zhang Zhifan? Everyone present knew him. He was New Cruise's CEO. However, in comparison, who was Gu Junjian? No one present knew him. However, Zhang Shun's fearful words drew everyone's attention to Gu Junjian. The fact that New Cruise's CEO came personally to wish Yun Jian a Happy New Year was already impressive enough. However, Yun Jian was New Cruise's CEO after all. It was only natural for a subordinate to wish his superior a Happy New Year. Zhang Shun was a junior police officer in Xinjiang Town's police station, while Gu Junjian was the nationally renowned captain of the Advanced Special Forces. That meant he was Zhang Shun's superior. Perhaps the people present did not pay attention to the special forces, but Zhang Shun was a part of it himself. Someone as famous as Gu Junjian would naturally have seen his photo before. Therefore, when Zhang Shun saw Gu Junjian's photo, his face turned green with fright. This was the nationally renowned officer Gu. No matter how powerful Yun Jian was, she was only an Advanced Special Forces soldier. Moreover, the Advanced Special Forces soldiers were quite a number. Even if it was the new year, Officer Gu could not possibly wish his subordinates a Happy New Year one by one. What did he ask for? However, as an officer, he had the time to wish Yun Jian a Happy New Year. This was not a joke. In the military, unless one was an extremely outstanding member, it was impossible for one to receive such treatment. A superior officer personally came to their home with gifts to wish them a Happy New Year. Naturally, the people around them heard Zhang Shun's thoughts. Previously, Zhang Shun had told them about Gu Yunjian's identity as Officer Gu. He was a VIP that even the country's CEO would approach. Country Z's military prodigy. He actually came all the way here to wish Yun Jian a Happy New Year. Naturally, everyone present was well aware of the stakes involved. Especially Qin Li, Qin Huan, Zhu Jia, and the rest who were disdainful of Yun Jian. They were completely dumbfounded. If they were already stunned when they heard that Yun Jian was a member of the Advanced Special Forces, the shock they felt now was indescribable. However, while everyone was still in shock, Gu Junjian had already nodded at Zhang Shun in a friendly manner. He smiled and said politely, "Hello." This greeting made Zhang Shun's mood surge. Gu Junjian, a military genius and the highest-ranking Special Forces officer in Z country, was actually trying to curry favor with him. Zhang Shun was so excited that he didn't know what to say. At this time, Gu Junjian had already bypassed Zhang Shun's field of vision. He looked directly at Qin Yiru and praised Yun Jian. At the same time, he took out a golden octagonal star medal from his pocket and handed it to Yun Jian. After verification, when the international god stole the antique jade pendant from Zhe province, your team monarch unanimously agreed that you were the one who led everyone to complete the mission. Therefore, I'm here this time with the approval of the higher-ups to reward you with this medal. The golden octagonal medal was very eye-catching. Gu Junjian placed the medal on the table and pushed it to Yun Jian. Yun Jian pursed her red lips and accepted it. The antique was stolen by the international god? And Yun Jian was the one who recovered it? Oh my god, that's the international god. She actually was capable of that. Qin Li was shocked before he could finish his sentence. Now that the mission was completed, the theft of Country Z's antique from Zhe province was no longer a secret. Instead, it became Yun Jian's honor for completing the mission. However, the moment Gu Junjian gave the honor to Yun Jian, Qin Li was stunned. Qin Huan was the most horrified. He had wanted to compete in Taekwondo with Yun Jian in an attempt to defeat her and show off his prowess. Chapter 467. In contrast to Qin Li and Qin Huan's shock, Qin Yiru and Yun Yi were stunned as well. Qin Yiru and Yun Yi were Yun Jian's closest kin, but Yun Jian's change was gradual. When did Xiao Jian become so amazing? Qin Yiru and Yun Yi were stupefied on the spot. Qin Yiru was at a loss for words. Her daughter had changed again, but as her mother, she had no idea. Yun Yi, on the other hand, looked at Yun Jian in shock and said in disbelief, Xiao Jian Yun Jian is excellent. She has the talent to be a special forces soldier too. I, Gu Junjian, have been in the military for decades and have trained countless young special forces candidates, but this is my first time encountering someone as amazing as her. There's no other like her. Gu Junjian interrupted Yun Yi and guffawed, giving the highest compliment he had ever given in his life. She was able to make Officer Gu give such an astounding evaluation. Everyone present could not help shuddering again. Was Yun Jian really that good? Looking at the disbelieving gazes of everyone present on Yun Jian, Gu Junjian joked, Why don't you believe me? You guys haven't seen her skills. TSK. I, Gu Junjian, swear on my honor that even the veteran members of the advanced special forces who have been on missions for decades don't have 1/10 of her ability. This was the difference. Gu Junjian had never lied, nor had he belittled his veteran subordinates by praising Yun Jian. It was Yun Jian who had the ability. She had the ability to live up to his praise. Officer Gu, you flatter me, Yun Jian said with a smile, lowering her gaze. At this moment, everyone present could no longer describe their shock with words. Of course, that was excluding Ce and Xiao Yunju, who was shaking his head nonchalantly. Since Gu Junjian had said so, Yun Jian was naturally capable. Qin Yiru was shocked as well. Both she and Yun Yi knew that Yun Jian was in the advanced special forces and received daily training, sometimes even going out on missions. Every time Yun Jian went out on a mission, Qin Yiru would tell her that her life came first and that she must come back safely. Qin Yiru, however, did not expect Xiao Jian's missions to be so difficult. From Gu Yunjian's words, Qin Yiru knew that Xiao Jian's ability had reached such a terrifying level. Mom, I don't take risks when I go out on missions. I'll only take action when it's completely safe. You don't have to worry about that. Yun Jian looked at Qin Yiru and saw through her worries. Qin Yiru was not proud of Yun Jian but worried that something would happen to her when she went on such a dangerous mission. Hearing Yun Jian's assurance, Qin Yiru's frown eased a little. Don't worry. Every mission I assign is based on their ability. If she doesn't have the ability to complete the mission perfectly, I won't assign her to it. Gu Junjian assured Qin Yiru as well. Qin Yiru looked up and glanced at Gu Yunjian's handsome face before nodding and telling him softly in a pleading tone, Officer Gu, please take care of my Xiao Jian. This was a mother's worry for her child. Gu Junjian nodded. In contrast to Qin Yiru's worry, Ce was not bothered at all. Chapter 468. With Gu Yunjian's assurance, Qin Yiru felt much more at ease. Of course, she was also overjoyed after she calmed down. The joy came from Yun Jian's excellence. She was Yun Jian's mother. Hearing Gu Yunjian's praise, Qin Yiru, as Yunjian's mother, was naturally proud. At this moment, Qin Li and the others, who had been completely ignored, continued to dejectedly bid their farewells. They didn't have the face to stay here anymore. Zhang Meihua did not ask them to stay as she watched them leave. She was busy entertaining Yunjian, Gu Junjian, and Zhang Zhifan, so she did not even have the time to send them off. Zhang Meihua was a practical person. She would hook up with whoever was successful. Before Gu Junjian and the rest came, Qin Li, who was a high-ranking official in Zhe province, had undoubtedly become the center of attention. Zhang Meihua, of course, fawned over him. Now that she saw Gu Junjian, Zhang Zhifan, and Yunjian, who were many times more powerful than Qin Li, she did not even bother to take the time to send them off. After they left behind a pile of tea leaves, eggshells, melon seed shells, peanut shells, and so on that were used to entertain guests during the Lunar New Year. The guests she entertained today were actually the same as the guests she entertained during the Lunar New Year. Qin Yiru and Zhang Meihua cleared everything on the table while Gu Junjian and Zhang Zhifan bid farewell and left. It was already 9 o'clock at night. Time passed quickly as the group chatted away. It would take at least 2 hours to return to Longmen City from Xinjiang town, so it was almost 11 when Gu Junjian and Zhang Zhifan returned. Why don't you all stay for the night? There are enough rooms at home. It was Qin Yiru's first time asking people to stay as the host since she returned to her parents' home. If it had been before, Qin Yiru would not have dared to say so. Zhang Meihua's house was actually the house of Yunjian's uncle, Qin Liqian. Zhang Meihua and her late husband, Qin Youfu, had left this house behind because daughters were all going to get married when they grew up and they only had one son. It was reasonable that this house became Qin Liqian's property. A married daughter was like spilled water. Since Qin Yiru was married, there was no reason for her to return to her parents' home. Actually, even if Qin Yiru came back, she would incur his sister-in-law's displeasure. Qin Liqian was a married man now. Even if Zhang Meihua was still around, Qin Yiru could still stay with her parents for a while after the divorce. However, if Zhang Meihua was gone too, it would be awkward even if Qin Yiru wanted to come back in the future. This was the reality of rural people. Therefore it was important for a girl to choose a good husband when she got married. Having an elder brother in her parents' home meant that it was impossible for her to return to her parents' home for a long period of time after the divorce. Qin Yiru had been forced to put up with Yun Gang's gambling addiction back then because she did not know where to go after the divorce. However, it was when Yun Gang's affair was exposed and her daughter and son strongly supported her divorce that Qin Yiru mustered her courage to cut ties with Yun Gang. I still have things to deal with at the company, so I won't stay. Zhang Zhifan smiled apologetically at Qin Yiru's request to stay. Chapter 469. The joy that Gu Junjian displayed was the thrill of having a duel between experts. Honestly speaking, Gu Junjian had had this thought for a long time. It was not that he wanted to defeat Yunjian, but he liked the thrill of dueling with an expert. It had been a long time since Gu Junjian met a decent opponent, and it had been a long time since he wanted to challenge someone one-on-one like he did today. Gu Yunjian's challenge was completely different from Qin Huan's. Qin Huan wanted to challenge Yunjian purely because he wanted to put on airs in front of everyone. Gu Junjian, on the other hand, wanted to duel with Yunjian because of Yunjian's ability. To Gu Junjian, only a duel between two experts was the true meaning. The biggest difference between Gu Junjian and Qin Huan was that Gu Junjian would not find an excuse or feel indignant even if he lost. Sister Jian, I'll be leaving with old He then, Zhang Zhifan told Yunjian with a smile. Yunjian nodded at Zhang Zhifan and watched as Zhang Zhifan and old He reversed their car and left. It was only then that Yunjian turned to look at Gu Junjian with a glint in her eyes. I accept. Gu Junjian was considered an expert, and Yunjian would never underestimate an invitation from an expert. Jie, what's a duel? Xiao Zhu wants a lollipop now. Right after Yunjian said that, Xiao Yunzhu, who stood beside Ce, tugged at Yunjian's sleeve and looked at Yunjian pitifully. Take Xiao Zhu to the shop to buy lollipops. Ce shoved Xiao Yunzhu's hand into Yunjian's right in front of Gu Junjian and the others and even grabbed Yunjian's hand. Yunjian was about to say that she had just accepted Gu Yunjian's challenge and wanted to duel with him. As if he knew what she was thinking, Ce turned his exquisite side profile to face Gu Junjian. There was an unusual golden glow between his sharp brows as he glanced at Gu Junjian and said, I'll duel with you on her behalf. Ce was not asking for Yunjian or Gu Yunjian's opinion when he said that. He was only announcing the fact that he was going to duel with Gu Junjian in place of Yunjian. Gu Junjian was stunned for a few seconds when he saw Ce suddenly stand up and say that he was going to duel with him on Yunjian's behalf. Gu Junjian already had some understanding of Yunjian's strength. However, Gu Junjian was unable to guess the bottom line of Yunjian's strength. Therefore, Gu Junjian had another intention when he proposed to duel with Yunjian. He wanted to test Yunjian's strength. He wanted to test how strong Yunjian was. Unexpectedly, Ce, who had been standing behind Yunjian and holding Xiao Yunju's hand, said that he wanted to duel with him on Yunjian's behalf. More importantly, Gu Junjian saw an unusual glint in this 19-year-old man's eyes. Gu Junjian did not dare to recklessly guess Ce's identity. Ce did not give Gu Junjian any chance to reject him either. Alright, I'll take Xiao Zhu to buy some lollipops. Yunjian did not see the golden glint in Ce's eyes. When Xiao Yunju held her hand and looked at her with pitiful eyes, Yunjian pulled Xiao Yunju's hand and walked towards a shop near Xinjiang town. Before they left, they did not forget to bid farewell to Ce and Gu Junjian. Qin Yiru was not downstairs at the moment, so she did not see this. Since Gu Junjian and Ce were still there, she and Zhang Meihua went to tidy up the empty bed. Chapter 470. In other words, only Ce, Gu Junjian, and Yun Yi were left in front of the courtyard. As for Qin Fenger, she had been sent back to her room by Zhang Meihua after she spoke rudely to Yun Jian. Qin Fenger was not afraid of anyone but her grandmother, Zhang Meihua. Therefore, she ran away in a huff when Zhang Meihua spoke. In fact, if not for that, Qin Fenger, who had been courting death, would have been in trouble. Yun Jian might have just let it go. As long as Qin Fenger did not cross the line, she would not have done anything to her. However, Ce was still around. Anyone who dared to humiliate Ce's woman would end up in a terrible state. It was just like Lu Xiaoxiu who wanted to frame Yun Jian back then. Lu Xiaoxiu had schemed to humiliate Yun Jian by taking a video of Yun Jian with other men to humiliate her. In the end, she had been sold into a brothel by Ce's men. Ce was not a good person. He would kill anyone who dared to bully his woman, even if they were women. A gentleman did not hit a woman. That was a lie made up by useless people. If he could stand by and do nothing when his woman was being bullied, then he would not be Ce. He would be called a coward. Yun Jian was not there for what happened after that. She was already holding Xiao Yunju's hand and walking towards the small shop in Xinjiang town. The small shops in Xinjiang town were usually open until 10 p.m. That was because the townspeople usually went to bed after 8 o'clock. The shop had been open for a long time to be able to stay open until 10 p.m. However, today was an exception because it was New Year's Eve. Other than young children, everyone would stay up until the new year. This was especially true for children after the age of 7 or 9. They were the most interested in staying up until the new year and asking for red packets. At 12 p.m. on New Year's Eve, firecrackers were a trend in the townspeople. Before 12 o'clock in the evening, many people came to the store to buy firecrackers and candles. Therefore, small shops that knew a little about business would stay open on New Year's Eve until 12 o'clock before closing. These things and common sense were things that Yun Jian had never heard or experienced in her previous life. Yun Jian, who wandered around the edge of the world and was always on guard against the people around her, would be killed if she was not careful. She had never lived the comfortable life of a normal girl. Therefore, Yun Jian cherished everything she had now. Yun Jian held Xiao Yunju's hand and went to a small shop not far away. This was the shop where Yun Jian had called Tiger Leopard from the kosher mercenaries when she had just been reborn. The owner of this shop was an old man. Yun Jian had been to this shop when she had just been reborn. At that time, the shop owner had casually asked her, "What do you want to buy?" Today, Yun Jian held Xiao Yunju's hand and stepped into the shop again. The shop owner glanced over and recognized Yun Jian immediately. He even shouted in surprise, "Hey, aren't you the little girl who called my shop a few months ago?" Yun Jian blinked. She held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked into the shop. She asked curiously, "You know me?" Chapter 471. Yun Jian smiled awkwardly when she heard the store owner's exaggerated words. So this was how he remembered her. "Oh, by the way, young lady, are you here to make a phone call again?" The shop owner sat down and asked Yun Jian after he recovered from his agitated state just now. "No." Yun Jian shook her head and led Xiao Yunju into the store. Then, she turned to the store owner and grinned. "I'm buying snacks with my brother today." She wasn't doing strange things. When Yun Jian was reborn, she was always at the top of the world, so Yun Jian was unfamiliar with the world. She always did things her own way in her previous life, so she followed her own personality when she was reborn. However, after living here for a while, Yun Jian realized that it wasn't advisable to do that. "Oh, okay. Pick whatever you want." The store owner laughed heartily and nodded. Yun Jian held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked around the store. Someone came to buy fireworks outside, so the store owner went out to take care of it. Midnight on New Year's Eve was the time when the fireworks were the loudest. However, it was only 9 o'clock, which meant that it was the time when the fireworks were the quietest. Every year on New Year's Eve, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 11 o'clock were the quietest times. Just like the darkness before dawn, the quieter it was now, the noisier the fireworks would be when it was 12 o'clock. Yun Jian let Xiao Yunju pick a big bag of snacks, Lay's potato chips, bubblegum, lollipops. Xiao Yunju picked a few lollipops alone. Xiao Yunju picked as he muttered, "Strawberries for brother Ce, blueberries for sister, lychees for Yun E." Her small hand picked through the pile of lollipops stuck in the box. Yun Jian wasn't a patient person, but she was very patient with Xiao Yunju. In the end, Yun Jian patiently accompanied Xiao Yunju to pick out his favorite snacks. After paying, they walked to Zhang Meihua's house. Although it wasn't far from Zhang Meihua's house, they still had to cross a few streets. At this time, every house was brightly lit, so there was no need to walk in the dark. Bang! Pa! At this moment in the silence there were fireworks. At this time, there would also be people setting off fireworks, but it was a minority. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. She held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked around an aisle. Coincidentally, a family in this aisle was setting off fireworks. It was not yet 12 o'clock. Most of the fireworks at this time were to worship the gods and pray for blessings in the coming year. Most of the villagers were superstitious while the people of Longmen City were used to worshipping the gods with animals like pigs' heads, chickens, and ducks. At the same time, they would also burn some Buddhist scriptures during the worship. These were the customs passed down from the older generation. Yun Jian held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked along the edge. When the fireworks were over, just as Yun Jian and Xiao Yunju were about to cross the aisle, a group of mischievous children ran out with matches, lighters, and small firecrackers. "Look, there's a bad guy walking past us. Quick, blow them up. Blow them up." One of the children who looked arrogant and domineering pointed at Yun Jian and Xiao Yunju. A boy with a crew cut grabbed a bunch of small firecrackers and lit them as fast as he could, throwing them at Yun Jian and Xiao Yunju. Chapter 472. Yun Jian's eyes lit up when she came out to buy some snacks and encountered such a situation. "Sister!" Xiao Yunju panicked. He grabbed Yun Jian's sleeve in fear and his small and stubborn body stood in front of Yun Jian, wanting to block the pile of small firecrackers for Yun Jian. Xiao Yunju was still young, but people were sensitive to danger. It was especially so for Yunju, whose experience in his past life had sharpened his sense of danger. When danger came, Xiao Yunju's first reaction was to block it for Yun Jian. "Xiao Zhu, come here!" Yun Jian shouted softly. She took Xiao Yunju and pulled Xiao Yunju to the side while she dodged to the side. Her quick and efficient movements made the parents of the naughty children, who were anxiously watching the situation from afar, shocked. She had made a turn to the side to avoid the attack, her speed unbelievably fast. After all, this group of naughty children had just lit the small firecrackers and thrown them at her, but Yun Jian easily dodged and took Xiao Yunju to avoid the big pile of small firecrackers. "Wow, that's amazing!" At this moment, even the little boy with the crew cut who had just lit the small firecrackers and threw them at Yun Jian and Xiao Yunju opened his mouth wide in surprise. He looked as if he had seen something amazing and looked straight at Yun Jian. However, before the little boy with the crew cut could finish his sentence, he was slapped on the head by his parent. "How did I teach you? I bought you small firecrackers and you learned to do bad things?" The little boy with the crew cut's mother hit him a few times and then took away all the small firecrackers in his hands. No more playing. Hurry up and apologize to big sister. The crew cut boy's mother took away the pile of small firecrackers and rushed the group of people to Yunjian to apologize. The naughty children were restrained by their parents and they all apologized unwillingly. Yunjian only glanced at them and did not say whether she accepted the apology or not. She pulled Xiao Yunju away. The naughty children's mother did not say much. By the time Yunjian brought Xiao Yunju back to Zhang Meihua's house, a small square folding table was already set up outside Zhang Meihua's house. There were 2 people sitting on the left and right sides of the table, and 1 person standing next to the table. The people sitting on the left and right were naturally Gu Junjian and Ce. The one standing was Yun Yi. She did not know if their practice session had ended, but she saw that Gu Junjian was excitedly sitting opposite Ce to sit on the bench and play chess. The practice session between the 2 of them was probably over. Yunjian held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked over. She saw that Gu Junjian was looking at Ce excitedly and respectfully as they played chess. "You're back." Ce tilted his head and asked Xiao Yunju. At the same time, he looked up at Yunjian. Because Ce was sitting on a stool, he could only look up at her. "Yes." Yunjian nodded slightly. Ce smirked, his lips curving into a faint smile that was refreshing and comforting just by looking at it. "Brother Ce, someone used small firecrackers to bomb me and my sister." Xiao Yunju pouted as he felt wronged. This could be seen from Xiao Yunju's expression. He was very unhappy. "Yes." Ce withdrew his thoughts from the chessboard. He turned his head and sized up Xiao Yunju and Yunjian. He only relaxed when he saw that they were fine. Gu Junjian could not help but secretly laugh when he saw this. If he guessed correctly, Ce did not want Yunjian to play with him because he was afraid that he would come into contact with Yunjian. Chapter 473. Xiao Yunju liked Brother Ce because Brother Ce would help him. He would buy him candy and toys to play with. Children were lively by nature and would rely on whoever treated them well. Xiao Yunju pouted and told him everything that had happened. Xiao Yunju sounded like he was about to cry after being bullied. When Ce heard that someone had used firecrackers to bomb Xiao Yunju and Yunjian, his long fingers, which had been playing chess, stopped moving. He retracted his hand and stood up from the stool. He strode over to Xiao Yunju with his long legs. He looked up and lowered his eyes to look at Xiao Yunju. There was a glint of anger in his eyes. "Who bombed you?" Ce asked after a few seconds of silence. Coincidentally, Gu Junjian saw Ce suddenly stop playing chess with him. He picked up a cup of tea out of boredom and blew on it twice to drink some tea. However, when he heard Ce's words, he nearly choked on the tea in his throat. Once Gu Junjian was reminded of Ce's terrifying skills and his wife-protecting demeanor, as well as what he had said just now, the atmosphere in the room was strangely subtler. He felt that his words did not match Ce's frightening skills. "I'm not injured. It's just a prank by a bunch of naughty kids." When Yunjian heard Ce's words, she guessed that if she didn't explain herself, he would bring Xiao Yunju over to those naughty kids' houses. Ce was indeed that kind of person. He was extremely protective and his personality was just like hers. However, it was New Year's Eve and the whole family was happily staying up for the new year. If Ce really went over to their houses, Qin Yiru and the others would probably be shocked and the matter would blow up. It was a good new year, so they naturally had to be happy. As expected, when Ce heard Yunjian's words, he immediately retracted his vicious gaze. "Young man, come on. Let's continue playing chess. With Yunjian's skills, you don't have to worry about her." Haha. Gu Junjian extended his hand to greet Ce with a hint of mockery in his voice. Ce and Yunjian were really a good match. Both of them were terrifyingly skilled. It looked like his old bones couldn't take it anymore. Ce reached out his hand to rub Xiao Yunju's short hair. He took a deep look at Yunjian before he sat down in front of Gu Junjian with a smile on his face. The two continued to play chess. The New Year's Eve was long, but it wasn't lonely. Xiao Yunju pulled Yunjian to sit beside Ce and watched as Ce played chess. His little hand was still holding onto Lay's potato chips as he munched on them. Midway through the game, Xiao Yunju even put the potato chips in front of Yunjian and said to her, "Sister, you eat." Yun Jian nodded happily. Xiao Yunju also gave Gu Junjian and Yun Yi his favorite potato chips before passing them to Ce. Brother Ce, you eat. I'm playing chess. Xiao Zhu, feed me. Ce revealed a devilish smile. One of his hands was empty, but he didn't reach out to take the potato chips himself. Yun Jian was sitting beside Ce while Xiao Yunju's little hands were barely hanging onto the folding table beside Yun Jian. Then sister will feed brother Ce. Xiao Yunju couldn't reach Ce's side. His little hand could only reach in front of Yun Jian. He reached out but couldn't reach Ce, so he said to Yun Jian. Gu Junjian, who was sitting opposite him, was speechless. Yun Yi, who was standing at the side, was speechless. Yun Jian's mouth twitched. Xiao Yunju still didn't know what was going on and stretched out his hand again. Sister, hurry up. Xiao Zhu's hand is sore from holding the potato chips. When Yun Jian heard that Xiao Yunju's hand was sore, she immediately picked up a potato chip and fed it to Ce. Chapter 474. He dared to be so impudent in front of Gu Junjian and her brother, Yun Yi. Warmth flowed through Yun Jian's heart, but it was tinged with a tinge of annoyance. Ce smiled faintly when he saw her reaction. His handsome face revealed a sinister smile. Yun Yi, who was standing by the side, also smiled sinisterly. This was his brother-in-law, whom he had personally tested. If Yun Jian heard what Yun Yi was thinking, she would definitely hiss. It's delicious. She heard Ce's comment out of the blue before his lips curled. His flawlessly handsome face arched a brow as he uttered, I want more. Yun Jian was speechless. Why didn't she realize that he loved eating potato chips so much? At this moment, Xiao Yunju had already placed the bag of potato chips in front of Yun Jian. Sister gave it to him. Brother Ce said that he wants more. Yun Jian quietly took out the bag of potato chips and placed it next to Ce's lips again. Strangely, the person who ate the most potato chips was Ce. When there were only a few mouthfuls left, Xiao Yunju hugged the bag of potato chips and refused to give it to Ce. He even pouted and said, Brother Ce, you're bad. You eat the most. Sister bought this for Xiao Zhu. You're not allowed to snatch it away. As he spoke, Xiao Yunju pouted and refused to let go of the bag of potato chips. After you finish this bag, I'll buy you 100 more. Ce made a chess move. While Gu Junjian was thinking about the next move, he stretched out his arm and flicked Xiao Yunju's forehead with his slender fingers. Xiao Yunju's eyes immediately lit up. He asked happily, Really? Brother Ce, will you buy it for Xiao Zhu later? I'll go after this game. Ce lowered his eyes and smiled. Yeah. Sister will feed these to Ce Gidge. Xiao Zhu will go buy more later. Xiao Yunju was quickly bought over. He handed the bag of chips to Yun Jian and clapped his hands excitedly. Yun Jian looked at the remaining bag of chips and suddenly had the urge to facepalm and sigh. After a while, the game ended. Ce defeated the last general on Gu Yunjian's side with the chess piece in his hand and won the game. Young man, no matter what, I'm still your elder. No matter what, you have to give in to me. Gu Junjian shouted in distress. Thanks for letting me win. Ce stood up. His hair was fluttering in the evening breeze. He pursed his lips and his handsome face was asking for a beating. I'm not playing anymore. Gu Junjian spread out his hands and shouted. Ce also had the same thought. He smiled slightly and walked over to Xiao Yunju's hand and pulled him toward the store. When they left, Xiao Yunju was holding Yun Jian's hand. Thus, Ce dragged Yun Jian to the store through Xiao Yunju. I'm old. I'm useless. Gu Junjian smiled awkwardly and stood up. Yun Yi also smiled and nodded at Gu Junjian. Coincidentally, Qin Yiru had already made the bed and came downstairs. Mom, I'll go upstairs first. When Yun Yi saw Qin Yiru coming down, there was no one left to entertain Gu Junjian. He said and went to his room. Oh, okay. Qin Yiru nodded. Thus, only Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru were left downstairs. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.